Yeah, I'll just click this button and quickly say where we are in the league, and then how do I introduce you guys? How do you want to be introduced? No one wants to be introduced.
Exile YouTuber, slightly crazy, slightly analytic.
I'm someone that talks about games and game design.
All right.
Probably a lot more than I should.
Good. No, I felt like it's a good idea to ask before I do a random intro, but that's about what I would have said. Let's see.
Better than me. I'd just be like, "This is Tenkiei. He makes videos on shit."
Yeah. I mean, that's pretty much.
That'd be it.
It's accurate.
All right. Well, then, welcome everyone to the FATED Connections Path of Exile Community Podcast, episode number 77. We are 3 weeks into the 3.18 Sentinel release, and we've just received a buff to one of the former chase items of the game, the Headhunter, which we will see whether that returns it to its former glory. And then, of course, there is a deep dive that we want to do on all topics Sentinel, that is, Sentinels themselves, the arch nemesis monster modifiers that have been added to the core game, and the recombinator crafting that we already talked about a little bit in the past 2 episodes. And in order to discuss these awesome topics, we got a somewhat analytically minded YouTuber called Sirgog up here, and Tenkiei, who also makes videos and stuff and comments on all things gaming. Welcome to you guys. We'll just jump right in. How have you been doing, Sirgog? What build have you been starting with? How have you been enjoying this league?
So I intended to league start with a Skeleton Mages, which I did, leveling as Absolution. I was intending to respec that to Arakali's Fang, which I haven't got around to yet. And I've got the Skelly Mages, just sort of at what you might term a low to medium investment still. And I've just started working on a second character, which is a trauma stacking Juggernaut. That there's been a couple of things that people have worked on in terms of solving some of the problems that build has had, by reducing the level of the Divergent Bone Shatter that you go to, so gem level 8 instead of gem level 20, or as high as you can get it, and also through the use of doppelganger guys and a few other methods of mitigating incoming physical damage. So someone that I've been working with, discussing the build with, it's sort of 80% his work, 10% mine, 10% someone else's, has done Uber Shaper with it while literally being hit by one clone firing the balls, one clone firing a beam, and the main Shaper slamming him while standing in a degen pool, and was still doing fine with it. So, was able to survive that. So Wow. It looks like it's got some potential, but I'm nowhere near that. I'm still in Act 6 on that one.
That sounds very promising. I'm looking forward to hearing more about that. Great. Awesome. What did you have as a starter, Tenkiei? Welcome.
Thank you. I started Corrupting Fever Gladiator, and it turned out pretty much as I expected. My only disappointment so far has been the Uber bosses. As it turns out, I was expecting a fight more like the Feared, where your ability to dodge stuff is kind of the paramount thing, and recovery ended up being a bigger part of a lot of the fights than I was expecting. That aside, it's been great for blasting maps, it's been great for everything that isn't an Uber boss, and it's maybe a little bit too good for Sentinel.
Too good for Sentinel.
Is that because you're safe to stand still and wait for the Sentinel to explode?
Now that Headhunter has been buffed, yes.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, Sentinel's is one of those mechanics that's very dangerous if you don't have either exceptional defenses or you just don't stop moving.
Just quickly trying to get some footage up here, because there's literally your last stream, Tenkiei, you didn't even do a single map. It looks like you've just been doing the rock crafting in Hideout.
Yep.
Just wanted to make sure that there's some footage.
Yeah, it was a rod crafting demo, so that was the entire stream.
Right. So you can make
OP.
You can make good bucks with rock crafting these days still.
Oh, absolutely. Better than you've ever been able to.
I forgot about rod crafting. You can rod craft and then recombinate.
Yes.
Yep.
You only have to rod craft half an item.
Yeah,
Oh
or
my
less.
God.
Also, there's stuff with Eldritch influences as well is incredible. Like if you get 3 amazing prefixes on an item, then Eldritch Crafting can get it into a sellable spot. It can just add 2 different, 2 additional mods on top. You just end up with something fantastic. The main thing was that in the 3.13 to 3.16 world, items had to be influenced to have a chance of being useful. That's no longer the case. They don't need a classic influence, and that was a massive indirect buff to Rogue.
Right.
Also, recombinators are a massive indirect buff to Rogue as well, because even just getting something like tier 1 spell suppression on a chest, now it has some innate value just from that one roll. And it's really, really easy to get 1 tier 1 mod using Rogue. In fact, one of the coolest items that I made was a bow that had, I believe it was tier 2 fire, merciless, good attack speed, and another good Ellie roll on a Harbinger base. And I know someone's going to recombinate it. I don't know what they're going to make with it.
Speaking of things that have got fire and merciless together, this makes me think, I wish that thing from early Path of Exile of physical damage with physical added as extra fire, that was a theme for a long time and just isn't very good anymore. Like, it's sort of okay, it's got some niche uses. I wish that was seeing more play. It's just one of those mechanics that's so iconically PoE. Herald of Ash in general, but that style of damage.
Right. Quickly, one question before we go back into probably more rock crafting and recombinator and Elstuff Sentinels. But Balor, you've been doing some Headhunter stuff before, and you were not very happy with it. Have the recent buffs affected you in any way?
I think Headhunter is the strongest it has been since they removed self-curse. It currently makes you completely immortal. And it brings my tooltip from 180k to consistently 5 million.
What? So many million?
Yeah, 5 million. Just my tooltip, not my actual damage, just like my tooltip.
Right.
And I'm in an elemental weapon, not a physical one. It's literally 4 times as good for a physical weapon. It's busted strong. It's the strongest it's been since self-curse was removed. The only thing you don't get that you used to get is the speed. But there are also no downsides. There's no downsides. The only real downside is that you can't use dash or whirling blades because of how Echoist works. Like, it'll make you'll dash forward and backwards at the same time, or you'll whirling blades forward and backwards. But all the other movement skills work fine with Echoist. You're immune to stun anyway, so Echoist is a good thing. It literally just doubles your damage. And the only other like downside that there is those like ice cages, but like if you're not running phasing in your build by the time you've got a Headhunter, what are you even doing? Just put phasing and you can just walk through it. So there's no downside anymore.
Yeah, I've never understood any of the complaints about Ice Prison because it's just you phase through it easy.
Yeah.
Or Flame Dash. You don't even need phasing. It's super easy to just Flame Dash through it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure, but Flame Dash requires you to not have Echoist on you.
No, you can Flame Dash. You can Flame Dash with Echoist fine.
Okay.
You can Flame Dash, Frost Blink, Shield Charge, Leap Slam, Lightning Warp. You can do all of those. You just can't use the actual dash skill or Whirling Blades, because those they go forward backwards instead of forward.
Flame Dash doesn't go forward backwards? Okay.
Nope, it goes forward twice.
Okay, fine. Easy then.
Yep. So it's the strongest it's been, and there are no longer any downsides except, I guess, Shroudwalker, but like Shroudwalker's existed. It's just part of wearing the belt. Like, that's not a new... It's exactly the same Shroudwalker we've always had.
It's just an enemy delivery system.
Yep. Huh. It just brings them to me.
There is one thing of just visual pollution. It can be harder to see things that you've got to dodge, but...
You don't have to
You don't have to dodge.
When I say immortal, what I mean is I'm in a 100% delirious map on a character with a 22k max hit and only 1.9k life. In a 100% delirious map with 7 beyond mobs on my screen inside a King Harbinger pack, and I can lift my hands up off my keyboard and watch my energy shield go 900, 890, 870, 850, 840, 800, and then after about 10 seconds go, see how tanky I am? And I've lost about 100 energy shield in 10 seconds. And then I put my hands back on the keyboard and attack stuff. I mean immortal.
Yeah, I did the same test. My character is innately tankier than that, but it didn't matter. I just didn't lose health. I think I lost more health to my own Corrupting Fever and Life Tap than I did to the enemies in the entire map.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And you get stuff like Soul Eater for 60 seconds now, so like speed is still fine, right?
Yeah,
or
you
Soul
don't
Eater
get the
just
old
so rare.
Headhunter levels of speed, but it still gets fast enough.
I will say, speaking of Soul Eater, I wish Zerfie's Heart was good. That's an item I've wanted to be good for a long time. And like it used to be sort of good. It was never quite as good as Headhunter, but it was really popular for a period, and it's just faded away. It needs +1 all gem levels, I think. If they gave it that, I think I would use it. Such a competitive slot now.
Yeah, I feel like the thing to do, though, would be +1 2 level of corrupted gems or something.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Flavor.
Yeah. Maybe even +2 to the level of Val gems.
That would be interesting.
That really feels Zerfie's Heart-esque.
Would that make you run several Val skills in your build if you had +2 Val skill gems?
They have counter synergy. Like there's that anti-synergy where, let's say you've got Val Haste and Val Fireball. When you've got no charges on either, charges are split between the two.
Exactly.
When, say, Val Fireball fills first, then Val Haste will get all of the charges that come in. But also when you pop Val Fireball, the Soul Gain Prevention will also prevent Val Haste from recovering for the time that Val Fireball's Soul Gain Prevention goes for.
And
you can work.
worse.
Yeah, you can make them work, and a lot of builds do. Like Val Righteous Fire gets used alongside a lot of stuff, but it's not something that's amazing.
And ever so slightly worse, because souls don't even get split between the two. Each individual soul gets applied randomly to one of them.
50-50,
so you can just be waiting for your fireball, and you can just watch haste go boop, all the way to the top, and nothing happened to the fireball. You're like, man, I wanted that.
Yep.
Looks like someone in chat already said what I was thinking.
Hate Forge.
Yup.
Yeah.
Waiting on that.
That's when you run the multiple Val skills, because then souls just don't matter.
Yep.
Right, because then they have rage cost, or what was it with Hate Forge?
I think it was rage cost, yeah. Which, if you're mapping and you have Warlord's Mark, means no cost.
Rage generation on your gloves. Can't do that.
Yeah.
That's the way I normally get rage now.
No.
Oh well.
The Elder implicit with the gain rage once every second or something like that on hit, right?
Yep.
It's 1.3 to 0.8, depending on the tier, isn't it? It's like 0.8 at perfect, 1.3 at lesser.
Oh,
That sounds right.
Yeah, that sounds right. I've rolled that on a pair of gloves, and I think I sold them, but I don't remember anything else. I just know that I didn't roll over it because I was like, that could be useful for the person looking for that kind of gloves.
Yeah, it's a very good mod. So is +1 strike target, though. Oh, that is so good. Or +2 if you elevate it to exquisite or higher.
Yeah. One person in my guild is blasting off this league with lightning strike, and he rolled that on several pairs of gloves. And it feels so good when you finally hit it, but it's so terrible when you try to hit it on a specific pair of gloves.
It shouldn't be that bad, especially this league. So what you do is you use grand ones. Now, I think grand Exarch currencies are something like 65 to the Exalt at the moment. Now, you should be able to get it with an Exalt or so at grand tier. Then you need to hit one successful conflict to get it to exceptional, then one more to get it to exquisite, which is where you need it.
Exactly.
So on average, that seems to cost about 7 orbs of conflict to get there. So what's an orb of conflict? Last I checked was 35C. I'm not sure if that's still the case.
I think last I checked, they were about 6 to an Exalt.
Oh, okay, so they're cheaper than that. There you go. So
Yeah, that's not too bad.
yeah, it's not super bad. It's getting the perfect tier, like 20% aura effect on chests. That's more expensive, and that's or like 36% temporal chains effect on helmets. That's more expensive. That requires you to get very lucky at a couple of points. SNS in chat is saying Grand Icons are 2C. That often you do need to pay more if you want bulk. And you are paying more. If you're buying them at 2C each, you are paying more because you're giving up on time.
Also, Ichors are generally cheaper than Embers because more people run Eater of World Altars.
True.
Why is that? Is that just because the altar mods are more favorable, or people are more looking for ashes than they are for omniscience?
Mostly the altar mods, but I do think more people are targeting ashes than Omnivis League as well.
Okay.
If you really want to get a lot of money, you go with the red altars, since you can do I forget the node's name, Wrath of a Cosmos.
Yeah.
Yeah, but if you're not doing that and you don't want to die, though with Headhunter I guess it wouldn't matter.
I'm just doing blue with Wrath.
Yeah, you
Wait,
go
yeah.
blue, and blue tends to reward you for going through maps faster.
Can I say on Icons and Embers, I do not like the progression at the moment, like where you've got 3 tiers that are very trivial to acquire, then the 4th tier is super rare. I think it was in a better place last league when the grand tier was a bit harder to get your hands on, because you didn't have Wrath of the Cosmos as an option, and so there was like more of a choice between using them. Whereas at the moment, it's just use grand.
Yeah, I've noticed that as well. It feels like there's too many grand, and it's really not worth it to use the lower tiers unless you're just putting something on to manipulate affixes on the item.
Yeah. Or like if you're just chasing something where, like if you're chasing a specific mod where there's almost no or actually no difference between the tiers, like +1 max cold res is, I think on gloves is an Eater implicit that it's 1% in all the bottom tiers and 2 for exquisite and up, and +1 strike target's the same.
True.
And things
So
like Intimidate as well, where you're like, oh, it's 15% or 18%, it doesn't matter. You've got 1%, you're intimidating when it matters. Like the difference is fine, doesn't matter.
Mm.
It does feel like the exquisite, though, are way too rare, especially since I haven't gotten one from...
Yeah. Exceptional and exquisite are different.
Oh.
Exquisite's conflict only.
Yeah,
Single
so...
activated.
Yeah, you mean
Yeah,
the grand, right?
No. I mean the 4th one, the really rare one. Way too rare still, seeing as they were supposed to buff the mini bosses to drop them more, and I still haven't gotten one from a mini boss.
I haven't bothered fighting the mini bosses again.
I fought them a couple times because I was thinking, well, surely I'm going to get more of these if I kill this more times, right? No. It should be a guaranteed drop.
They are like the mini bosses drop noticeably better loot than they did last week, but it's still not good enough to justify doing them.
Yeah, Eternal Struggle hasn't quite got there. It's a cool item, but it's just not quite good enough.
Yeah, I have yet to see anything drop from the mini bosses that showed up on my filter.
Really?
It would show up on Catmaster's filter.
No, I'm talking about exceptional, not exceptional. I'm talking about Eldritch Currency.
Yeah, I didn't get any from the 4 or 5 I did.
I only did the quest ones, but I saw nothing. Haven't killed a boss since like day 1.
Yeah, makes sense.
I just want a map, man.
The thing with that RPG source is that Polaric Devastation is actually very, very, very rare. Like we're talking 3 to 4% drop rate. Someone did 576 of them last league, and I can't remember the exact number, but I think it was like sub 25 that they got from a quad tab of Black Star fights. So yeah, you've got a 2 Exalt drop, but that doesn't actually add much value because it's like to the EV of the fight. It's like adding 3 or 4 Chaos probably to the EV of the fight, which, if you use a Sentinel in a map, you'll get 10 at least.
That's kind of sad. I really want to like the little fights. I think that there's some things that it can do to make the poop boss that is commonly recognized as the worst boss fight in PoE, or at least people just hate it. Like they could make that really good, and the Black Star is already amazing. I like both of the fights thematically; they're really strong.
Black Star is one of the best designed fights I've ever done, and it just doesn't really have any impulse to do it again. It's like I'd love to see a Black Star version that was like that had higher stats to the point that you had to engage with the mechanics. The most fun I had in all of 3.17 was going into the Black Star with about 150,000 DPS at the time, no idea of the fight mechanics, and just going, I am learning this. I don't care how many sets I rip. I'm going to learn it. And six portal failures later, I learned it and got it down. It was an epic fight, and it was so much fun. So much fun.
Yeah, I really like the design of the Black Star. I really like that you can use the floor to cheese certain mechanics, and it feels very rewarding to do it. And then the other one, the Infinite Hunger or Discount Loathsome Dung Eater. Just play Elden Ring. It's a better fight.
Wait, is that the same fight in Elden Ring?
No. Just similar themes.
Oh, okay, right. The dung theme.
Yep.
Well, before we move on, we haven't talked about Headhunter really that much. Balor quickly answered the question about the buffs, but what I'd really like to know from everyone, how do you guys feel about the buff being implemented so late? Do you think we should expect item power levels to be adjusted this late into the league? Is that something that you're a fan of? Do you think that they should do it more, or?
I think. Do you want to go first?
I was going to say I'll come in last, but you can go. You decide. You go now, or you tell me to go.
I'll start then, and then
I'll say Tenkiei then.
Yeah.
It's my bad. I always ask questions into the round, and then I never say who should answer it, and then always get this. But yeah, go for it, Tenkiei.
I think in this case, it makes sense. And it makes sense because of the very last part of a buff that a lot of people probably skipped over, which was improving the monster diversity because they improved how memory was handled by the game. That sort of back-end optimization is going to take time. If it had just been extend the buff to 60 seconds, no, it should have happened the day Arch Nemesis got nerfed. But because there's that back-end optimization, and because it's something that doesn't only buff Headhunter, it also buffs Replica Headhunter, Inspired Learning, and makes the game feel better as a whole, even if you're not using any of those items, since you don't get 6 of the annoying monster that has the mod you hate in your map now. I understand why it took so long, and I would expect that future changes which require a back-end tweak like that might similarly be delayed, but no, it's not going to be common, and it's going to come with some sort of underlying change like that.
Yeah. So my attitude to balance patches is that there's a different threshold between doing one mid-league and doing one at the end of the league. I think GGG are too cautious about doing emergency balance fixes mid-league often. Like, they've done a couple of them when it's clear that there's a build that's being developed that can literally AFK all content in the game, like the Zero Mana Aura Stacker, where there's from Scourge League. That's the sort of build where if that percolates to bot cheaters, then it is going to destroy the league completely, because you'll have bot cheaters simply, just acquiring ridiculous amounts of items, selling them, undercutting legitimate players. That's a league economy destroying issue that needs to be fixed. So that's an extreme example of something that I think they need to fix immediately. Then there's cases where it's not urgent, and for those, I'm generally happy for them to be left to the next league. That said, this one was a bit of a special case because they sort of did say multiple times on multiple different channels that they were intending to buff it. So there was a comment made on the official Path of Exile website, there was comments made on Twitter, there were a bunch over on Reddit. So I felt like things had been clearly enough communicated that most of the players that can realistically aspire to acquire a Headhunter had equal knowledge of this. The worst situation would be if GGG had sent out an email to selected people within the community saying, hey, we're thinking of doing this. What are your thoughts? Please respond in private without mentioning this to the community, and then gone ahead and done that. But while they were doing that, there'd been a whole bunch of the people that had this insider information had gone and bought all the Headhunters. That'd be the worst scenario. That certainly wasn't what happened here, but as long as there's a quality of information, I don't really mind a non-urgent balance patch happening like this. But I think in general, this one could have been held off. The stuff about fixing the back-end changes, though, that should have happened. Even if they'd left Headhunter at 20 seconds and done the Rare Monster upgrades, Rare Monster fixes, that would have been fine.
Yeah, I'm just checking the value here on PoE Ninja. Oh, it did go up quite a bit in the last couple of days again.
Its low point was approximately 37, 38 exalts. I was watching the price of Doctors. They got as low as 4.6. So what's 4.6 by 8 is 36.8. So that's the lowest it got.
I think I paid 32 for mine, but I bought at pretty much the exact lowest.
I bought at 29, so you didn't buy at exactly the lowest.
I was gonna say, one person in my chat told me they bought like 10 for around like 30x on average.
Must have been when I was offline then, which wouldn't be hard.
Yeah, I bought at 20. So, look, I'm sad that they took that long to buff the Headhunter. From anyone who was following along with me knows that I was like directly hooked up to a copium truck for like 15 straight days. Just wearing the Headhunter while everyone's saying it was shit. And I'm going, I know, but it's going to get better. Don't worry about it. It'll be fine. It's going to get good. It's going to get good. And then I finally ran out and I took it off and I just put it in my stash and I put on a replica one. And then like a day later, I'm like, hey, it's back. And I was like, oh, swap back into this one. But I think the reason that it's fine is because from like day 4 of the league or something, there were posts everywhere of we are buffing this. Like we knew there was a buff coming for a long time. It's not been a question of will they fix it. It's been a question of how long is this buff going to take.
Yeah.
And I think that makes it fine. Whereas if they said nothing about it at all, and then 20 days into the league were like, we buffed Headhunter, it's now this fantastic thing, and they had never mentioned it, I think that would have been a problem. But because it was super clearly communicated, that's fine.
And the buff was necessary, just for the record. There was like no way that...
Literally trash.
Yeah.
It's garbage belt.
They couldn't have left it in that spot for the entire league.
I mean, they could have done whatever they wanted. Just
there's
no one would
plenty
have
of
wanted.
items that have fallen from grace over time.
Yeah.
Like, including very rare items that... Like, Rosalata's Coil is a perfect example of an item that, okay, it's not quite as rare as Headhunter, but it's in the next rarity tier down. This used to be a super meta, somewhat chase item, one of the most expensive drop anywhere uniques in the game. And then it's just fallen completely out. Skyforth, yeah, even better. Skyforth's a better example. That's only a tier 2 rarity as well.
Oh, I actually found Skyforth this league.
It may not be on your loot filter now, Skyforth, and this is something that used to be
Not on mine.
35 exalts. It does sell if it's Divine Perfect, though. It's worth IDing for the... Well,
Nope.
not for the 1 in 61 of it being Divine Perfect, but if it's within 3, it'll sell pretty well.
Nah, leave it unID'd in my Keepers tab, bringing that to standard.
I leave it on the floor of my map.
The item's still good, it's just that other stuff's been power crept past it.
Yep.
I think the death of Archmage, or Archmage, was really the final blow for Skyforth.
I think it was the Tailwind Boots that was the final.
Elusive Tailwind Onslaught Boots. How am I going to beat that?
Yep.
The only time I don't use Elusive Tailwind Onslaught Boots is when I'm using 20% Quant Boots for Quant farming. Otherwise, Elusive Tailwind Onslaught, let's go.
Or it's League Start, can't afford them yet.
Yeah.
Or you're corrupting Fever and you just can't crit.
Oh, that would suck.
Yep.
Sounds terrible. Yeah. I mean,
They have made the Veil Chaos Orbs improved like non-influence boots a lot. And there are like you can find good uses for Eater and Exarch boots that have got a Veiled Chaos Orb craft on them to, with good mods. That can be competitive. Like you can get the drop Spiral Ground stuff and things like that.
Yeah, right. The new implicits are also pretty powerful on the boots.
Yep. Action speed multiplier.
Love that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, I personally also like the drop sapped ground. I mean, I know no one in softcore cares, but like the sapped ground that makes enemies deal less damage.
Yeah, brittle ground. That's the one you
brittle
want.
is OP, yeah.
I really don't like the ground boots. I find the radius to be annoyingly small.
It is, but it's there when you need it. It's not a general DPS multiplier. It's a complex action you can take when you're fighting a boss that you can't burst down inside 8 seconds. Then at that point, the brittle ground becomes worth it. But if in just general mapping, it's useless.
Yeah, probably. Although, like with the Arch Nemesis modifiers, we'll have rares here and there that survive a little bit longer, that you kite around a little bit on the ground that you leave behind. So here and there, absolutely. Here and there, you'll definitely run into a situation where things live long enough so you benefit off the ground.
That's true. You can also make 55% chance to avoid ailment boots.
Yep.
Yeah, so like that's
higher. It's 35 plus 32, so 67%.
Oh my god.
Yeah, because that's what I'm doing on my Corrupting Fever Gladiator. I cap with 67% on boots and 33 on chest.
That's crazy.
Nice.
Just boots and chest?
Yep.
Just become ailment immune on every build. It's like, there's so many ways now. Also, just a shield. Shield the boots would also do it.
I just go with purity of elements. It's so easy. Plus, I mean, that's the way to give my minions ailment immunity as well.
Yeah, that's a good use for it. And your minions want the resist too.
I'm not sure they don't really need the resist. Like, I think the Animate Guardian, for example, is capped off of the gear and the base resists alone, but just the fact that they can't be frozen in place and can't be shocked to take more damage, that's very helpful, I think.
Back to Headhunter, there are two incredibly common.
Oh, wait.
Your minions have.
Oh, no, yeah, no, now it works. Your minions have what?
There are two incredibly common Arch Nemesis buffs that you steal, and the buff is your minions have. And you get 250% minion life out of them. If you put on a Headhunter on a minion build, your minions are now immortal. Or
That's crazy.
if they're minions that you kill yourself via popping them somehow, they have 250% increased life.
That's terrifying.
A lot.
Minion instability build with Headhunter incoming.
Or that stupid helmet.
Death Wish.
Yep, that's exactly what I was thinking.
The Boomer helmet.
That is my back pocket build for 319, assuming everything else gets nerfed into the ground, because I think it's going to survive.
Mine too. Everyone who's paying attention is like, this build is like this far away from being one of the S tier builds from this league. It's like just a step below the S tier builds. Not far though.
Oh, I think it's straight up S tier.
If they nerf the S tier and they don't get rid of it, it's just the best.
Are you talking the Ignite build or the non-Ignite?
The Ignite.
Both work, but I like the Ignite version better. From what I've seen, I haven't played it yet.
Yeah, a friend of mine's been playing it because he came to me with a build that he got off of a very sketchy PoE Ninja, and I told him to play Deathwish Ignite instead, and he's been having a ton of fun with that.
Nice.
But after watching him play it, it's 100% S tier.
What would you say the clear time on, say, 10x investment? What would you say the clear time on a 60% Delirious tier 16 would be? Just elked and polished scarabs.
No idea. I only saw it after he had significantly more investment, but
Okay.
non-Delirious versus 100% Delirious, there was no difference for the build.
Oh, wow. Okay. For anyone in chat that doesn't know, 100% Delirious is 96% monster damage reduction, so 25 times effective health.
Basically. Makes like white monsters as tanky as Shaper or something like that in tier 16s.
No, not to that extent. It does make map bosses tankier than Shaper, though. I'll give you a number on let's take what's the name of those stupid monsters in Act 5 that jump around? Kitava's Herald. I'll just check
Stupid monsters in Act 5 that jump around. I would have never come up with Kitava's Heralds. That description.
I think of them as the one that do the fizz projectiles.
Okay, so a normal rarity Kitava's Herald has 115,260 hit points in a tier 16
okay, yeah, that's
map.
not quite Shaper.
Times 25 is a little bit under 3 million. So with 100% Dully, that's one of the tankier monsters in the game. That thing is going to be about as tanky as like half the life of a standard tier 16 map boss.
That's still pretty
And
crazy.
with magical rare, it'd be higher.
And then you empower it with a Sentinel, and then it becomes Shaper levels of tanky, because that should be another 25 times multiplier.
Is that how it works?
I haven't confirmed it with testing, but Chris did say it worked like levels of Delirium, so I'm assuming it's the same for 100% empowerment.
It just feels like more than that. Like when you've got, say, 40 empowerment on a monster, that feels more like 80% Dully. It does not feel like you've just added 60% EHP.
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure. I haven't actually tested it. I'm just going off of what Chris said and the fact that they feel super, super tanky for sure.
Yeah, they are. Oh, I mean, we've all made mistakes of empowering the wrong thing.
Thanks, this Fox.
So essence mobs on the first week of the league. Oh, it's only got 8 essences in it. I'll just empower it with my... Nope. Out you go, buddy. That's the essences mobs map now.
I did that with one of the easiest map bosses, Shore map. It was an Apex Sentinel with a high empowerment rating, and I'd hit a bunch of Eater of Worlds altars with the double downsides. Oh my god, that thing was incredibly tanky. Like, I was stubborn and I was determined, right, I'm just going to kill this. I know it's not worth it, but I'm going to kill it anyway. And I think I might have been at it for 7 or 8 minutes.
Oh.
That's the worst, when you commit to something for multiple minutes and you're like, I have to kill this now, otherwise I wasted all this time.
Oh, it wasn't a sunk cost fallacy. It was just let's mess around because this is just something different and stupid. And I'll do it for fun.
Yeah, I did that with some of the unique Apex Sentinels that do the 100% empowered bosses.
Oh, yeah.
Those things, some of them are pretty mean. The Fire and the Fury one, that's actually a pretty legitimate mean fight when you get 100% empowerment.
Fire and Fury is the map boss of the Lava Chamber?
Yeah.
Lava Chamber. Oh, God, because she's got that healing effect when she's standing in fire.
Yup.
So you've got to play the mechanics because that's one of those fights that gets a lot harder when it's got a high number of higher EHP.
Absolutely. Yeah, we've somehow jumped all over the place. It was a very enjoyable conversation so far, but we should maybe focus in on one of the core topics, and I think let's talk a little bit about Arch Nemesis in general. We've been sitting at the current state for like a week or a little bit longer now since the last adjustment. You guys all feel Arch Nemesis is in a good place now? The new mod system. I always call it Arch Nemesis, even though it's not technically Arch Nemesis anymore. But if you just say Nemesis, then it doesn't do it justice. If I just say mods, then I don't know whether people know what I'm talking about. But yeah, I've been able to play around a little bit. I personally think it's quite okay, with the occasional outlier where you get like a super scary monster. I have no problems anymore, but that may also be due to the fact that I've already, progressed my build a good amount.
Yeah, I think one of the things that makes it really hard to assess at league start, and there's something I was talking to Catmaster about before, is that when you have an economy reset, it causes everything to get a lot harder, and people really underestimate that effect. And so suddenly you've gone from this situation where you've got 2.5 shapers per second of damage on your character, and you are deleting the outlier rare mobs like that in a map. Then you have some balance changes that take place at the same time as an economy reset. And now instead of 2.5 shapers per second, you're now 1 shaper per 220 seconds. So, you're like 2.5 orders of magnitude less damage. And you can't really judge the difference in mob power as a result of that. This would have been a change that would have been better if it was done 2 weeks before the beginning of 3.18, I think. And then we would have got much more of a clear sense, because launch day was crazy. I had a lot of fun on launch day. There was stuff that was overtuned on launch day, definitely. But it's hard to know, did it need to be nerfed as much as it was? I don't know. It did need to be nerfed a bit. I do want that original experience back as a private league mod, though. If GGG are listening, please give us a way to have that craziness of Arch Nemesis, of 318 leveling in day one. Give us a way to have that back as a private league mod so that we can have some fun with it. And I would probably never level outside that, because it's just made early games so much more chaotic and fun. But yeah, that's something that I think has made it really hard to judge.
Yeah, I can totally see that. I'm just not sure how much the surprise or the how much hype would be still there if we already knew the system for 2 weeks. I think a large part of a league start is that there's so many new things happening at the same time. But like you said, it's completely right to say that it does make it hard to judge where the lack of power comes from, or makes your build feel inferior when in fact it hasn't really changed much.
The other really big advantage of introducing it 2 weeks before would have been that we wouldn't have seen blanket nerfs, we would have seen targeted nerfs. Yeah. And Arch Nemesis didn't start feeling noticeably different until the targeted nerfs. I feel like having the 2 blanket nerfs was too much of a knee-jerk reaction. It was too much of people feel like this is bad, but can't put their finger on why. And I much would have rather just 1 blanket nerf, maybe even a stronger blanket nerf, and then walking it back a little while doing targeted nerfs to see where's the good middle point. Where are rares still challenging without being oppressive?
I don't know if either of the 2 blanket nerfs that happened needed to happen at all. I think the original power level was actually a good level, and the problem was all of the targeted stuff that they did. And I think if you left them at their original level, that targeted stuff could have been even stronger. Instead of 70% reduced effect of things, it could have been 50%, right? All of those things could have been hit harder in the specific ways that Brick builds, but leave the generic power on that got rid of originally, and I think we'd be really good.
I think mostly I agree with Balor, but not completely. I think that the original life on monsters was too high, and I think they could possibly have considered having a hard cap on, what's the Shaper has, I think the Shaper has 3600% base unique monster health. Just make it so that 3600% base health is the cap that Arch Nemesis mods can't raise a monster above. And then, so that means if it was tier 17, they'd be Shaper tankiness. If it was tier 16, they'd be about 15% less life than the Shaper. that would be a reasonable spot then. And then there were a bunch of mods that were stuff, but generally I had a lot of fun with the chaos on day one.
One of my favorite suggestions that I saw was to scale down the power of each Arch Nemesis modifier compared to how many Arch Nemesis modifiers are on the rare. So if you get one, it's at 100%. If you get two of them, both of them exist, but only at like 85%.
Yeah.
And then if there's three, all three exist, but now they're only at 70% power each. It would still get significantly harder, but it would stop that outlier case of here's one mob that suddenly obliterates everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I also wonder if the monster diversity change would have also made it feel a lot better. Because the thing that felt the worst about Arch Nemesis to me, I was playing Corrupting Fever, so getting Steel Infused was annoying. I wouldn't encounter one Steel Infused in a map. I'd encounter 3 to 6 Steel Infused. And so that whole map felt bad. And ever since they did the change, that doesn't happen anymore. There's a much, much better diversity of monsters. And I almost feel like just that fix, without adjusting the power level, would have made it feel way better for players who felt something was wrong but couldn't put their finger on why.
Yeah.
I haven't really mapped a lot since the change. Please go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt.
I was mostly agreeing with Tenkiei.
Yeah, I'm curious to see. I'm also agreeing, but like I said, I haven't really mapped a lot since the change. But I can totally see that already being the biggest factor. When you have like 1 or 2 Arch Nemesis mods that are particularly bad for your build, that's okay. If you can deal with the other ones just fine, but if on several maps or like specific maps you get like 3 or 4 of them, and other maps you get none of them, then it's a little bit imbalanced.
Yeah, I think one thing with the Arch Nemesis changes that's significant as well is that now there's 1 or 2 Arch Nemesis mods I'm going to call out separately for this. But broadly speaking, if you get one shot, it is telegraphed now. In 3.16, 3.17 era, there were one-shots that happened that were basically substantial added fears next to crit aura, next to haste aura. And you had basically very little warning of that, potentially none if the aura sources were off-screen. Nowadays, if you get one shot by something, it's something like Magma Barrier. Now, there are 2 exceptions to this, Effigy and an off-screen induced Abrath Touched. Those are the 2 things left that can one-shot you without any real visible counterplay. And those 2 are potentially problematic now. Abrath Touch is very rare, and also it doesn't seem like most monsters can one-shot you with it. But those are the things that can be invoked from off-screen and can kill you.
What's the ability that's problematic with Abrath's Touch? Abrath's
the
Touch
meteors.
is the meteor ability, okay.
Yep. It's when the monster that's conjuring it, like when the monster uses that ability, there's a telegraph, and that is Abrath's projection appearing. So that warns you must move. If you stay in your current spot, you are going to die. But that can happen when that monster is slightly off-screen. And so you don't
scale with main hand attack damage?
Probably.
Yeah,
I don't think we know.
It also could very well be base fizz with fire conversion, which would mean it scales very scarily with map mods.
Oh, yeah.
True.
Yeah. I think one other thing that makes Arch Nemesis feel harder than it is as well is that there were a number of buffs to map mods in 3.17 that, things like the addition of 60% reduced aura effect on players, 70% reduced cooldown recovery, stuff like this. Really nasty map mods that were added that actually mean that we are weaker against equal content than we were in the past. That's a clever way of GGG to essentially nerf players in a way that doesn't show up in PoB.
Yeah, how are you guys actually rolling your maps? Because I've seen from a lot of people that they don't alch their maps because it's not necessary for sustain. I guess that's pretty much a hardcore thing to do. In softcore, you still want to max out your loot that you get by just throwing an alch on.
Let's talk about that in Sentinel, because there is a case for transmuting maps at the moment. You outgrow it, but there is a genuine case for it.
Fair. Well, in regards to Arch Nemesis, are there still like problematic outliers, still mods where you think that shouldn't be in the game? Or that needs to change?
I think that, like what sirgog said, Effigy and Abarath, because they can off-screen you, and Effigy especially, if you're in some sort of hectic map, you still can't see it.
Yeah.
What we need is in a Backsoth style, your entire screen flashes, you know something very bad just happened, or its effect needs to be reduced significantly, or it needs to be completely reworked.
Yeah, I think that Effigy should be changed so that when the monster is hit, when the Effigy is hit, that applies a damage over time debuff to you that is comparable in danger to Corrupting Blood, and that stacks 10 times. So if the Effigy gets hit 10 times, you're in trouble, but you're not instantly dead. You've got time to counterplay, and that may just be as simple as getting away from the Effigy. The Effigy should be as blazingly bright as Magma Barrier is when it's got the charge up explosion. Do that, and those two things, and Effigy is fixed. The main thing with Effigy is that it is just instant damage that's really hard to see the source of, and then there's Abarath off-screening. Abarath's fine when he's on screen. He's scary, but he should be.
Abarath just needs a range decrease, that's all.
Yep.
Just so that it's forced to actually run into the screen before it does its thing.
Or summon the projection closer to the player always, even if the enemy's off-screen.
Yeah, that's perfect.
I can see that. I don't think Effigy needs to exist. I'm now running a build that's good enough that will never be a problem again, because I kill entire screens all at once, but when I was running slower builds, Effigy is like one of the only things that was not super obvious to me. Like I can never see it.
Yeah, that's the issue. You can't see it.
That's the issue. When I wasn't one-tapping everything on the screen, I would die to effigies because I didn't know they existed. And same as you were saying before, I feel like I can tell like 95% of the time now when I die. I saw it. I saw it. I saw that happen. I was just too slow to move. Or I thought, nah, that'll be fine. And then it wasn't fine. like that's what's happening now. And that's great.
Yeah. And can I say to people that are dying to Arch Nemesis, the single biggest thing that will reduce the amount you die to Arch Nemesis is getting Chaos Resistance. You want to have at least 40% Chaos Resistance against hits. And in addition, if you're under 60% Chaos Resistance, you want the Beltcraft that grants 40% further Chaos Resistance against damage over time. So those two things combined, that's where I'm sitting at the moment. I'm capped against Chaos Dots, and I'm in mid-40s or maybe low 50s against Chaos hits. It was Toxic that was the one that was killing me, and I found that out because I watched some frame-by-frame of deaths. And I'm like, oh, that's the thing that's always happening in those chaotic screens where I'm dying. There's always toxic balls, and I'm derping them.
Yeah, the toxic balls and the fire volatile replacement thing, they got me a lot. And I feel like they could have a little bit better signaling in the audio.
That changed a couple of days ago. I got improved. The VFX on them. They're still not. It's not, the fire volatiles aren't as clear as Magma Barrier's charge up effect, but I don't find I have trouble seeing toxics now.
Yeah, I mean, I got used to it. I got used to playing around it and being aware of it, that it could happen at any time, and then I was a little bit more comfortable with it. But if you would have asked me like a week ago or 2 weeks ago what still needs to change about the Arch Nemesis, I would have said just remove those or return those to the old volatiles, because I really missed that hot gas sound from the old volatiles. You know, when it comes out. And then, you know, even if it spawned like 3 screens away, you know there's a volatile headed for you. And that was just completely removed.
Needs sound.
Yeah, I didn't have that problem, but that's probably because to reduce lag on my old computer, I turned sound effects off for so long that I was already used to looking for the visuals and not listening for the sound. I did have a lot of trouble with Toxic when Arch Nemesis first came out because I was using a Mirage Archer. And as it turns out, green on green is not a very good color scheme for seeing things to dodge.
Yeah, who would have thought?
Yeah. Once I stopped using a Mirage Archer, it became painfully obvious how easy to dodge it was.
Mm. Can I say one thing though? One final thing about Arch Nemesis is that XP on the monsters that are ridiculous to kill should be scaled up high, because XP is an award that you can give a lot of without breaking anything in the game's economy. It's got to be careful about Domain of Timeless Conflict, maybe don't have this in effect in Domain of Timeless Conflict at all. But when a monster has 4 Arch Nemesis mods and has massive hit points, give it massive, massive, massive XP, and then players will want to kill them. Players love getting a Jun mission XP hit.
I feel like it's already so easy to level now that we don't need to be doing more XP stuff.
I disagree here, because I don't think it's about just giving people more EXP. I think it's about making the monsters feel more rewarding. And giving more loot in the form of items doesn't really feel right for this. So I like the idea of it rewards you in EXP and you still get things like the little explosion because all your gems leveled up because you killed the scary thing. And so you feel more rewarded subconsciously.
Yeah, I think XP is in a broken spot in a lot of ways, and I've long thought Domain of Timeless Conflict should be nerfed hard to deal with that. But I think that there's a few spots like XP from mapping and gem XP from general content are something that could be tied to harder fights within the map. And yeah, like Ariante's saying in the chat, more XP, it may not actually make up for the extra deaths, but it will feel good when you get it.
The Domain of Timeless Conflict did get nerfed a little bit indirectly by the Headhunter change, right? I feel like a lot of people were able to carry them with just the Headhunter, more or less.
It's still so far past what it was even in 3.9 era.
Not anymore. It's been completely unnerfed because you wear a Headhunter and now your character just stacks damage and Headhunter fixes all your defenses.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I would be for Domain of Timeless Conflict getting a 75% less XP multiplier and see how it feels. I think people would still want to run it. It's got genuine good drops.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly
you would just get rid of the carry and the fee. Yeah. Like, people aren't going to be like, hey, bring me to 10 timeless conflict fights, because it wouldn't be worth it for XP, but you would still farm it as a duo or trio or anything like that.
Yeah, and that's the interesting part. Right now, the drops aren't very valuable, because what everyone is valuing is carrying an EXP. So if you nerf the EXP and you get rid of the ability to sell carries and use it for power leveling, I think we'd see a lot of timeless jewels actually go up in value, since you don't have people that can, vendor them all, practically, and still make a profit.
Yeah, or what they do in practice is they get, they'll list 75 on TFT. Someone will come and buy all 75. They will pick through them according to a spreadsheet that they've got, and they'll be like, yep, this one's good for Inquisitors with Righteous Fire. This one's good for XYZ other build. This one's known to be good for having, Cult of Chaos in a certain spot that people want with the Javaqua mod. And so we're gonna keep those 3, and then we're just gonna turn back and put the other 72 back on TFT. That's the way people are doing it. Then someone else will pick through it with their own spreadsheet, which might not exactly agree with the first person's. And it's just, timeless jewels are a mess.
Yeah. What's actually the best way to get one? You can buy them on TFT with complete descriptions of what they do in which socket, or because I've been thinking about.
Those are expensive. I usually buy 10 and then 200 divines, and then I just.
Yeah, that's what I've been doing, basically. I've been divining, well, not 10, but I have a single elegant hubris, and I've been, throwing every divine at it, and, putting it in the socket and looking, and it's like, oh, no, it's shit. And,
usually what I do
buying is 50 and then selling the 50 back.
Yep.
At 85%, or no, at 95% of the price you paid for them, and if none of them what you're after.
Okay.
Yep.
Does it make sense to, make a character that has access to more jewel sockets, so I can find out if there was another good one, so that I don't roll over something that's potentially valuable for someone else, or no one buys them?
That's how you make these spreadsheets.
So if you're going to do that, you need to write down every seed and make yourself a spreadsheet, because it is not worth doing if you have to do it twice.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly that. You're looking, if you're doing that, you're one of the spreadsheet people. Otherwise, you just divine for something decent yourself and put it on, or you buy one that's really good.
Yeah.
You don't sit there and do that. That's too much work.
One thing you can do, like there's a number of things. I have a maths background, so there's a number of things that you can do, like analytically, to say what's the probability of getting better than this. Once you work out, like maybe you work out that there's 3 specific notables that are exceptional on your build, and you rate them 1, 2, and 3, and then you're like, okay, I've got 2 of number 1, 1 of number 2, 1 of number 3. You can just analytically calculate the probabilities of getting better than that, and then say, okay, this is going to be 1 in 175 divines. No way am I rolling over this. It's not going to be exact, but you can make some reasonable estimates. Comes up a lot if you want to stack one specific mod, like back when the pre-nerf version of 5% increased effect of flasks, 8% increased effect of flasks on you, when it was not non-unique flasks on you. That one, there was some analytic research that was done on the probability of getting 6 or 7 of them, and people can confirm that you probably could not find a jewel that had 7. 6 might exist, and then a couple were known. A couple of seeds were known with 5.
Yeah, and something else you can do if you're divining and you want to potentially get some money but don't want to spend a ton of time is just put the seed number into the trade site, and if you see a bunch of expensive listings and no other listings, don't roll over it.
Yep. Or, because I don't normally recommend this, but for timeless jewels I think it's fine, because you are only going to be affecting people that are flippers by doing this. Just list all of your timeless jewels for 3x, and if you get a message for it, then that's one to investigate. Like, normally that is really unethical behavior, but I have no problem messing around flippers.
Yeah, I know. With timeless jewels, you don't really have much of a choice anyway.
So, interestingly, that's the way I deal with all of my loot. I have a dump tab that's at such a high price, no one should message me at it. Right?
Oh, yeah.
And then I have a bunch of tabs that all just step down the price slowly, right? And then if anyone messages me out of any of that tab, the other tab was only 20C higher, so I know that the price is in that range somewhere. I just sell it. I don't check anything ever.
I do that, except I do it slightly differently. I fill up a tab. Maybe I'll put it at 275C or something. And then it used to be every Conqueror cycle. So now it'd be every time you get 14 maps for an invite. Every 14 maps for an invite, you then drop all your tabs by 10% or so.
Yeah, no, that's how I do it. I change the price of the tab.
Yeah.
And just rotate them around.
Yep. I do it a little differently, though, where if there's something that I suspect is worth more than my price, I just price it manually. I very, very, very rarely get message from my 2 Exalt dump tab. If I do, it is usually because I accidentally misclicked something into it that shouldn't be there.
Yeah, that's a different matter.
Yeah, those are the things I need to improve on. It's like, as someone who barely ever plays Trade League, I don't know, I just don't like to spend time thinking about how I want to trade and what I want to trade.
That's why I say just do the dump tab approach. Throw everything into a tab that's it, and just start it at 2.5 exalts and just keep bringing it down.
Yeah.
Every time you've done a certain amount of content, bring it down.
Yeah, right now I only have one listed tab and everything's individually priced, so I'd have to tear things apart there. And I'd also have to free up some tabs to start with that system, but that's definitely next time I'm playing next time I'm starting the Trade League, that's how I'll be doing it.
We can set this up tonight.
Yes.
Change your tabs around, put on my loot filters that I'll provide, and then never think about pricing anything again. I swear you'll have a better time. And you'll make way more money.
Yeah, I'm gonna type it.
I'm gonna keep pushing this until Catmaster agrees to put my filter on for a day.
I don't honestly think that your filter practically makes as much of a difference, but yeah, I'll try it.
I promise it does.
Oh, yes. Having a strict filter is very often the difference between making an extra 1 or 2 exalts an hour minimum, or making, if you're really good about it, an extra 4 or 5 exalts an hour.
It's the difference between running 18 maps an hour and running 30.
Mm-hmm. That's exactly what it is.
And like obviously the specific content you play on top of that, like if you've got expeditions and blights in your maps, then maybe it's going to be a little bit, the numbers are both going to be lower, but it will be 18 to 30. The ability to just do 3 maps back to back without stashing in between is something that's fantastic. And I've got to tighten my filter up. I'm still running a loose one.
Sadly, I have found that the more I juice my maps, the less I'm able to do multiple maps back to back.
Oh yeah, you hit a point where you can't. But at least while you're still running the I can't use scarabs and my maps are just inherently juicier than they otherwise would be.
Stream of consciousness.
Yeah.
That's the one. Until you unspec that, which you should do once you've got a decent scarab pool built up, but until you unspec that, you should find that you should be able to do 3 maps back to back without stashing. Maybe 2 with Sentinel, because Sentinel's super lucrative.
I'm really happy when I only have to leave my map once during the map to dump my stuff on, and I've got a very strict filter as well.
Yeah, but you also run like 100% delirious shit.
Yeah. I'm doing shenanigans, but still.
Yeah.
And I think banking like every map is not that bad. It's like you just come out of the map, you put in the next one, you press open, and then while the map opens, you just dump your entire inventory and then you hop into the next map. And that works fine also for me. It's just that I'm too lazy to clean my dump tabs, and then whenever my dump tab is full, I just start a new one, and I do that until I have no more empty tabs in my stash, and then
so
you just end up at a horror day where you have to clean through like 10 tabs.
Here's how you fix that. That dump tab that you are too lazy to empty, that is now your 2x tab.
Yes.
It has a lot of un-ID jewelry and shit.
I do everything, mark it 2.5x, and maybe do a search first for the Exalters mod on amulets.
That's a good point,
so what's all spells would be a search for that. Sorry, no, all skill gems. So do a search for all skill gems. Then
exactly. I noticed that the searching for the affix names doesn't work anymore, or did it ever work? Am I stupid? Or a combination of those before? Because I think I couldn't search anymore for affix names in my tabs. Maybe I just spelled it wrong or something like that. Maybe I made a mistake. Yes, you are stupid. Chat is confirming I'm stupid, so that's fine.
Okay.
Yeah, that +1 amulet. Oh, I finally did it, by the way. I finally got the +1 skeleton and +1 spell skill gems amulet. Sadly, no life. But disgustingly high amount of attributes. Like I think tier 2 all attributes, 32, something like that. On a Citron base with the +1 skeleton and +1 all spell skill gems.
I just tested it. You can't search by mods for rares in a tab.
Yeah, that's what I said. It's weird. Because I'm pretty sure it worked at a certain point, because I remember like entering when I was alt spamming stuff on flasks or whatever. I remember entering the name of the mod into the search window.
Flasks you can, because those are magic items.
Yeah, it's in the item name.
Use Balor's armor, never ID again. What? That only works for magic items.
Those are all you need.
Oh, because you've been doing the Cloak of Tamaraili stuff, yeah.
I'm pulling 200 to 500 chaos extra per every map I run off the floor. I've been doing it for days.
Oh.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah, explain to us how it works. I'll be right.
How many, like, if you were to run just tier 16 Alcan Go with polished scarabs, what sort of expectation would you have for like one Exalted mod per 20 maps? One Exalts per 50 maps, one per 10.
It's so most of the money is made in 50 to 30C items in bulk. And I would expect to see 4 or 5 of them a map in a normal Alkengo no juice strategy.
Oh,
Yeah.
yikes.
And here I am doing double beyond 60% delirious. So I'm pulling a lot of those items out.
That's nice. AFK, I'll be back 45 seconds.
No, I don't think... people have been complaining about Toms since I made the video because they're like, oh, it's 8x, oh, it's 14x. That chest is worth 100x.
Yeah, until recombinators get changed, I've been very tempted to use it, except for the fact that I don't want to give up suppression and ailment immunity. And so what that really means is that my next build is going to be able to use it without having to worry about those things.
Yeah, you'll just plan, oh, okay, so I can't use my chest to get ailment immune. I'll do it a different way, and then that's all. For anyone who doesn't know, Cloak of Tom Isley, basically the only thing it does that matters at all is found magic items drop identified. It's a chest that's existed since 2 point something. It's very old. Like, it used to be bought from like the Elrion Master in your hideout randomly in his vendor. It's like super old. I don't know exactly how old, but it's basically irrelevant most leagues until we got recombinators, and now just having tier 1 suppression on a pair of blue gloves makes me 30 chaos, and I pick 4 of that exact item up off the floor every map because they're all identified. The even bigger part for me is I spent a very long time working on a filter to filter Sentinel mods, and then I hid all Sentinels. And so I no longer see rare Sentinels anymore. I don't see any magic Sentinels, I don't see any white Sentinels, I don't see any Sentinels. Unless they have one of the good mods on them that are worth money. And then they just show up. So every Sentinel I see is a good one. And I love it. I love it. Picking up only like 1 or 2 Sentinels a map instead of literally 50 a map is so nice.
Yes. We're going to talk about Sentinels and mechanic later. One thing I was going to say is that identifying them is not fun.
No, it's not. I really feel like what we need is lucky loot. So there's so many systems, like Sentinels, like Arch Nemesis, that when a couple drop in your map, it's good. But the more you juice your map, the more of it drop. And the more of it drop, the worse the system feels to interact with.
Yeah, someone's asking in chat what are the good Sentinel mods, and I was going to say, like, items have a chance to be... No, sorry. Monsters empowered by this Sentinel have X% to be Delirium rewards is nuts. Absolutely nuts.
Delirium
Like,
rewards specifically,
delirium.
or you mean like just generally the X% chance to have rewards?
No, I'm talking Delirium specifically. It's a rare mod, and it just rains item of 84 Delirium cluster jewels in high tier maps. Well, in tier 16s, when you've got a Stalker Sentinel with that, and when you run through the entire map, having allocated the node that makes Stalker Sentinels not count on normal monsters.
I can't use that node anymore.
Too much hassle.
Builds
Things are too dead.
Yep. The better your build becomes, the less useful that node is because the Sentinel's too slow to kill.
No, you run a lap
on a whole map and not.
You run a lap of the map without killing things. It's like
But
super
I kill stuff at walking speed, so you've just doubled the length of my map.
That's fine for that mod. That's fine when like when your monsters that you kill have like a 2.5% chance to drop a, the blue monsters at least have a 2.5% chance to drop an I-84 cluster.
I don't think there's enough clusters that have high enough value to actually make up for it at high density.
Because of this mechanic. There's the reason clusters have fallen so much this league.
I think that sounds accurate, but also makes it sound like it's not worth my time.
You've got to try it at least. Just for a bit of
The thing
bit of
is,
fun. It's
what I'm giving up by doing that is ROG currency and stuff like the expedition reward. I just use the expedition reward once. Like I get so many reroll currencies, like so many.
Do you sell them or do you use them yourself?
Nah, I just sell them. I don't really do expedition because I just don't like it as a mechanic. I'm super aware of how rewarding it is. I just don't enjoy it, so I don't do it. Which means I've got very, very little of the stuff I would need to actually sit at ROG and craft. So I've got tons of rerolls, but I can't like gamble for belts for more than like 20 seconds before I'm out. Right? Because like I'm not doing any expedition content. So I only have rerolls. So I just sell them all.
Right.
And for those listening and also in chat that are asking how you filter Sentinel mods, it's really annoying. It's not supported in Filterblade. You have to make a bunch of custom rules. You have to add every single base Sentinel to the custom rule list. None of them is supported. Every one of them throws up an error message as you do it because the item doesn't exist. I've done it. I've made the filter public. I've also made the section of that filter a module that you can add into any filter you want. So I'll make a video on that.
That sounds good.
Probably tonight, and then people will be able to either use my filter to begin with or add that section to their own filter with just a few clicks. So we'll do a video on that soon. So that
But the requirement is anyway that you wear the cloak because otherwise they won't drop identified.
Yeah, you wear the cloak.
Or the corrupted unique sextant also drops quite a lot of identified ones. You could also use this and just have it added anyway and put it on like a bigger sound, and then you would just be alerted when there was a really good one that you could see. But
how often do you drop one identified though if you're not running corrupted and if you're not running the cloak?
I don't know because I haven't mapped without one of those two things in like a long time now.
It's rare.
I don't think you do very often. It's mostly from things like strong boxes. Which is only true if they're corrupted.
Yeah.
Or if they've got the Old Calandra mod, which is quite cool.
I have the filter that I put in for filtering Sentinels is specifically in my Toms filter. Because realistically, if you're not using Toms, you still have to go around IDing them off the floor. But that was such a miserable experience to me that I'm not wearing Toms for the rest of the league. Every build I make is going to have Toms on it, or it's going to be an exclusive bosser. Because I'm done IDing that many robots.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you could just hide them all and just buy the ones that you want to use instead, right? You don't need to pick up any.
It's true. That is what I'll do. If I have to make a build that doesn't have the chest, I'll just accept that I'm buying robots or I'll stop using them.
I have never bought a single one. Is it easy to trade for them?
Early on, it was super easy. Now, not sure. I've been very lazy about it, and instead of buying ideal ones, I just use kind of okay ones that I have.
I guess it's harder to snipe a good one now, because people actually know what's good and what's not good.
Yeah, do keep in mind you can reuse them a fair bit. Like with power cores, it seems about 2 and 3 that you keep the mod you care about. Like if you combine 2 magic ones together, and they've both got a decent suffix. Like let's say that I've got a monsters have a chance to have a delirium reward, and Balor's got a monster have a chance to have an expedition reward, and they're both Stalker Sentinels, and we merge those together. It seems like from the research that was done on recombinators and normal items that it's like 1 in 3 that you get both, and 2 in 3 that you get one of the two.
That sounds not too bad. I don't know. I've been unlucky with recombining double magic. Like if I combine 2 magic, I so often only get a magic result.
Oh yeah, you get magic often, but that's fine. Like you've kept one of the mods. That's what you want. You've basically refilled one of the Sentinels and destroyed the other. Might mind that.
True. No, for me, it also combines with not getting the mod that I want, and then just deleting it after.
You need to combine 2 good mods.
Yeah.
Or, even better, 2 of the same mod.
Yeah, doubling mods is really strong. So we haven't really talked about Sentinels at all. Like, I mean, we've mentioned them here or there, but like the Sentinels as a topic, we haven't taken on. What's your, since we've talked about it already quite a bit on the other podcasts with the other guests, Balor and I, that is. But we don't know any of your takes. Tenkiei, what do you think about Sentinels in general?
I think that they need some work. I was really hoping that there was going to be more fixes to Sentinel, because right now, the worse your build is, the better they feel, and the better your build gets, the worse Sentinels start to feel. And I really don't like it when mechanics scale inversely with your strength. The whole point of Path of Exile is you start weak, and you get strong. And the things should get better. You should be able to do harder and more exciting things. Instead, you just spend more time waiting. But at least the Headhunter buff means that you can wait safely.
Yeah.
I have to say that, like, I feel like the Sentinels, there is certainly a point where there's a point in your progression where tapping the Sentinel is like, oh my god, what have I done? I have made a terrible mistake. That's the sort of entry level. That's when your character is like, oh yeah, I can beat Eternal Lab, but it's not going to be easy. Maybe when you've just got your first tier 6 map done. Like, that early in progression, you're on a 4 link from leveling. At that point, using a Sentinel is like, oh my god, what have I done? I've made a terrible mistake. I might have just bricked this entire map. Then you reach a point where you can cope with that. And then you can reach a point where you can just blitz through everything, and like your Sentinels don't necessarily get a chance to proc on a lot of packs because they die too quickly. But it depends really on your passive damage projection, and things like Asenath's Gentle Touch that passively kill monsters, or Herald of Thunder and things like that. Once you reach a certain power point, they don't play well with Sentinel. But if you haven't reached that point, Sentinels is a really fantastic mechanic. I think it's not quite perfect, but it does some really interesting things. And I find it's like, I had low to medium expectations of the mechanic. I thought, I'll give it a go. I've been impressed by it so far, the way it plays. But you will definitely reach a point where it's just like, now I've got to run through the map with my damage source off. Maybe turn off Herald of Thunder, run through a lot of the map, and then do a second lap with your Herald of Thunder on and start killing. And then you can start killing the empowered monsters.
So
they seem to have gotten something right with XP on it. Sentinels are just a massive amount of XP. It feels like a Jun mission level. And also they really make map bosses ridiculous when they stack with other multiplicative things.
We spoke on this a lot last week as well in the podcast, but I think Sentinels are like one small change away from being like the best thing that's ever existed. This is all they need to do to change it. They need to take the base movement speed of those Sentinels and triple it so they can keep up with any character. This will have no negative effect on slow characters and will just make it actually work when your character can run faster. Yep. And then they all need about a 300% increased cast speed just at base. Just their base amount they need to go off 3 times as quick as they do, and cast 3 times as quick as they do, and just empower stuff quicker. Again, very little negative effects, if any, and just makes them usable once you get a functioning better character. I did not have these problems in the first week because I was too weak and playing a slower character. But the better I'm getting, the more I keep thinking, do I need these? Like, are they good enough? Like, do I want to keep...
Do you think those changes should be baked into the base Sentinels? Or do you think it would be fine if it would be awarded via the tree or via explicit roles?
I think that needs to be literally just baked into the base system. They're just all too slow in every way. And if they were just fast enough to be used, that and, like... Unmodifiable is fine. There was no reason for them to be unidentified. They could have all been identified right from the word go.
Reaching through the choir.
If they really, really wanted us to not be able to filter them out, and that's why they didn't ID them, they could very easily have just made us not able to filter them out. They can do that. They can just make it so that we can't make a filter. We can either only turn off magic or turn off rare. So we'd still have to look at them. That could have been done, and if they wanted to do it that way, they could have done it that way. But there was no reason that I have to pick them up, put them in my inventory, ID them in the map because too many of them drop them back on the floor and they're bad. That's a bad gameplay loop.
Yeah.
Outside of that, it's like the best League I've had in a long time. I love the way they're used. I love the tree. I love that there's different kinds. I love that I can't use all 3 kinds effectively, so I have to make some decisions based on the kind of content that I'm doing. I love that there are so many different ways that I can use them that are all valid. There's so many good things about it. It's just all too slow. That's all. It's just all too slow.
It's very much almost good.
Yeah.
And the fact that they're 2x2 is just like unfathomable how that went live.
Oh yeah, that doesn't make any sense. Like, and the stash tab for them is way too small, which is an extension of the same problem. But
this reminds me. Go ahead.
Okay, here's the way that I would modify Sentinel if it was to go core, and I think it should in some form because the mechanic is fun. I would make it so that there is no Sentinel tree. Some of those effects get baked into the Sentinels. That you can only equip one of them instead of having 3 different types. You can only equip one of them at a time because ultimately it's going to be a smaller factor in your content progression in the future. Same as in Delve League, you got a Nico poo pile in every map. Then it became much rarer than that to get them. So it's going to be less of a factor in future leagues. But then have it so that you can have one of them equipped, but so that there's none of this crap about them being magic rare. They shouldn't be consumable items. You just pick from one of the 3 of them, and I think that maybe have some sort of selection for the types of gear that you want to work towards, sort of rewards you want to work towards. The whole idea of making them consumables is just unnecessary make work. It's like Legacy League. Legacy League had some cool stuff with it, but it also had a lot of unnecessary make work, and this is the same thing done again.
See, I like that they're consumables during the league.
During the league, yes.
If they weren't consumables right now, by day 5 or so, I'd have just had the best ones, and I would have just carried them to every character forever and never made another decision again. And I think that would have made it real boring.
You can't have them be I don't think that they can be rolled and not be consumables. If they're rolled, then they have to be consumables. And by rolled, I include just identify scroll crafting as the only form of crafting.
Yeah.
But it would be fine. If you had you've got a Pandemonium Sentinel, an Apex Sentinel, and a Stalker Sentinel, you level them up. Maybe you do have some form of Sentinel controller, but you can only use one of them at a time. When you've used one a few times, kind of like the High Strokes, really trivial to level them up. And then you can just, sort of use one and maybe have slightly better rewards than you've got now. I think the gameplay loop of them is a lot of fun.
I think, for me at least, if it was going to go into the base game, there's 2 things. I've got 2 schools of thought. One is, it's just going to appear like all the other stuff. You enter a map, this is randomly a Sentinel map, and then that's just going to give me 3 randomly rolled Sentinels with the entire tree filled out, just by default. So I've got all the power that more than the tree could possibly offer me right now, because I've got every single node, but only for that one map, and with 3 random Sentinels that I didn't get to control, they exist for that one map. My second school of thought is, I don't really care about the robots or the Sentinels at all. But if you take away my recombining stuff, I'll be very, very upset, and I will ugly cry on the bed for an hour. Please keep my recombobulator things. I need those. They're really fun.
You're talking about the item recombining, or you also want
I think, for me, if Sentinel is to go core, first of all, they need to be faster. So let's take your character's move speed and add 10%, and that's the Sentinel's speed. It will always outrun you, so it can always buff mobs ahead of you. Second of all, increase its range by 50 or so units, so it buffs things slightly before you see them.
Yeah.
And then make Pandemonium Sentinels activate and buff everything instantly. No delay, no cast time, just done.
Yep.
In terms of
use Pandemoniums.
Yeah. In terms of whether or not they should be itemized, I actually like the idea of keeping them as items that drop, but I think they should be rare items, and even if they have limited uses, they should last longer. So you'll get a Sentinel with a core that has 30 charges, which keeps the busy work to a minimum.
Yeah, that would work.
Yeah. I really can't see, like, unless they do it like Balor suggested, that it's just a 1 in 10 maps basically where you have them, it's just a Sentinel map. But if they keep them as like things in the game that you upgrade and go through, then they definitely need to have charges. But I'd also be in favor of them having more charges so that you don't have to do the recombination stuff or change the Sentinel that often.
There was a good suggestion that was made in chat as well. That was that 8% of maps by default, and maybe varied by various factors, is a Sentinel map. And when you get in there, there will be a Sentinel cache at the start. You open the Sentinel cache, you pick between 3 different Sentinels. You equip one of them, and you've got that for the map. Maybe you get 3 uses of in that map. That would be something that would work. I think that's actually much better than my suggestion.
I still very much like the idea of having higher investment Sentinels, which means they need to be persistent tradable items. And that making them rarer, like, let's say you got a Sentinel about as frequently as you got an Exalted Orb drop. But they had a lot. Yeah, but they had a lot more charges, and you could still craft them with recombinators. And I do think they should be moved to recombinators, because the core thing, it feels like it adds a bunch of currencies that don't really do anything for the game.
They're a mess.
Which way? You mean you should recombinators? You think they should be unified into one type of recombinator, and then they should also cover the power core function? Because then you get like a competition between, do I recombinate a pair of Sentinels or do I recombinate actual gear? And I think that's the purpose of why they separated it. They didn't want people to have to choose.
With them separated, that recombinators are a bit too strong, and one way to reduce the power without reducing the functionality is to unify them.
So I think that if you did that, people would primarily, people would be extremely picky about what they used recombinators on in the way of Sentinel stuff, because I'm assuming that if recombinators go core in their current form, or in your sort of idea of a merged form, they'll be a lot rarer in future leagues. That's always happened when there's been a league-specific currency. 4-socket resonators in Delve are much rarer in 3.18 than they were in 3.4, and that'll be the case in the future. In that case, that's a big opportunity cost to get an extra refresh on one of your Sentinels, but it might be worth it.
So I don't actually think that making recombinators rarer is the answer here. I think tweaking some of the back-end numbers on success rates of some of the crazier stuff might need to happen.
Yeah,
maybe
for that.
Yeah, reduce the success if you're using a fractured item, reduce the success if you're using an item with a Sentinel mod. But overall, the goal of recombinators is destroy lots of items, so they need to be relatively common. But I also feel like if they need to be common, right now they're a bit too strong for what you can make, even if we make it harder to abuse fractured and harder to abuse Sentinel mods. So this idea of unifying them means things that you could recombinate are going to be the limiting factor, as opposed to, well, why wouldn't I make a really good weapon? I can only use weapon recombinators to do that. Now you'd think, well, I could do that, but I could also recombinate this Sentinel, or my armor, or this amulet. And it'll make people think a little bit more while still encouraging them to destroy lots of items.
So I think on the item destruction thing, like we had a few mechanics around that, and they've been mixed in their reception. So we had the 2 Implicit Corruption Chamber and Scourge, which were basically the same thing. One of them was well received, one of them wasn't. And, you know, both of them, well, 2 Implicit Corruption Chamber was more likely to destroy your item. Yeah, we have lost Cat, haven't we?
I'm here. No worries. I'll be right back with the visual.
Alright, cool.
Yeah. Like, 2 Implicit Corruption Chamber has, what, a 25% chance of improving the item, 25% chance of being neutral, 50% of ruin. Scourge was probably more likely 70% of neutral, 15% positive, 15% of destroying it. And so, you know, but they were broadly similar. The high points were lower. That was the reason Scourge was less well received. Like the highest of the highs was lower than a 2 Implicit Corruption. But fundamentally, that's the sorts of mechanics they've tried a few times. Some have worked, some haven't. Recombinators are more about creating stuff that exceeds the past limits of the game. And I think checks and balances are important because at the moment, like Recombinators have done, they're a fantastic tool, intuitive crafting tool for a more casual player. But currently, they are increasing top-end power more than they're increasing bottom-end power. That wasn't the case before Diabetes King's post on how they work. But now they are increasing the power of the sort of Maven-capable tier of the player base far more than they're increasing the power level of the I might beat Eternal Labyrinth by the end of the league, but that's a hard fight for me type of player.
So one thing that you touched on, which I disagree with, was Scourge. I don't think it was that the top-end rewards weren't impressive enough for people. I think it was that people didn't see those top-end rewards often enough. Because you could get 2 absolutely insane Scourge modifiers on your item, but whereas there's a lot of exposure through, especially things like GFL, to insane double corruption, so in players' mind, double corruption is good, there wasn't so much with insane Scourge modifiers, because it was so much rarer that someone just quietly hit it without being a content creator. What I think that Recombinators do really well is they put that front and center, because everyone gets those moments. The highs aren't as high as either double corruption or Scourge, but everyone gets to experience the moment, which puts it front and center in everyone's mind.
That's true. The highs aren't as high except when you're min-maxing Recombinators. Yeah. Like if we're saying, let's say for instance, the thing that I did when I was recording a video, I recombinated an Exalter's Amulet with a +1 Cold Skills Amulet. And somehow actually it became +1 all skills +1 fizz. Wasn't what was expected. I've got some theories on how that might have happened. But that's the high tier result that is not flawless. A perfect result would be to get the Aura Effect mod as well. That's the sort of god tier result. That's the equivalent of getting 2 good corruptions on a double corrupt. That's the equivalent of getting, ridiculous Scourge Keystone or something like that. That's the sort of thing that doesn't happen very much at all. Then there's the stuff that happens that's more realistic, that's an improvement on the items, like what I got, which was a +2 amulet. That sort of stuff happens quite a bit, and that's what I think Recombinators are at their best, helping the sort of player that struggles a bit with Eternal Labyrinth but gets there by the end of the league, helping that player boost their character's power to get items they've never been able to source in the past. That's very different to helping Balor get his 15th Mirror of the League.
Don't know if I've ever been quite that rich, but I don't know. Like here's the thing. I don't think it's that strong compared to, say, Harvest Crafting, which, like, your top level of player was already doing. We're not, like, there's a few niche cases there's like a few cases where I can make something so strong with recombinators that Harvest could never have achieved it, like triple temple gloves or triple essence weapons. But at the same time, I made a triple essence wand, and that took me like 3.5, 4 hours. I bought 120 bases off the market. I spent 200 and something recombinators and 200 odd essences as well. And like, that was a lot of time spent and a lot of energy spent. And realistically, I've crafted weapons that good before. And I'd do it again without recombinators, but this was a way more fun way. So I feel like it didn't really, like, yeah, you're like 1%ers or whatever got more power, but I don't think it gave us as much of a respective, like, relative power increase as it gave a casual who's like, say, just now getting to red maps, 20, 25 days into the league is now starting to finally farm red maps. I would say that player gained a bigger percentage of damage or power in their characters than I did. Like, I'm looking at a weapon that's maybe 5 to 10% better than what I would have had without it, whereas that player can be looking at twice the power in their gear that they would normally have.
I mean, I just straight up saved something like 600 exalts on the gear that I made for my character.
Yeah, but so the thing I'm getting at is I think that we did increase top end power. I just don't think that the percentage of increase in power that I got is anywhere near the percentage of increase in power that casual Andy, who just made it to late red maps, got. Right? Like, I think they're upgraded by more from their normal respective power level than I am.
I'm hesitant
to use them and does research in how to use them, which I think in general, okay, so the thing that we've ascertained with a lot of experimentation on these things is that probably one of the best uses for them, if you've got an item slot that wants to get 2 or more specific prefixes in place. So let's say a physical weapon where a merciless prefix or similar, merciless Takati's tyrannical prefix and a flaring or similar prefix. We've ascertained now that the best way to craft that is to get merciless on one base, flaring on another, benchcraft the same random garbage prefix on both of them, and then merge the two. Now, those instructions can be followed by Casual Andy, and Casual Andy can afford the merciless bases. So at this point, yes, they can probably eventually, I think it's, I ran the numbers on it, it's 179 sets of bases and 252 recombinators gets you 106 successes with this. So basically, yeah, Casual Andy can make 4 attempts, get one of them eventually, and have a flaring and merciless weapon. And that's probably affordable. That's a big boost for them, although they won't have attack speed. They'll have to then solve that probably with a bench craft, and they'll have a good weapon from that. I just think in terms of general, how many 10% more multipliers is this compared to what they might have otherwise had, which is, say, a Starforge if they're two-handed, or, well, maybe not a Starforge, but something. Starforge is a bit worse now. Then contrast to the ridiculous stuff that can be done with fractured bases. Like, fractured item transfer is crazy, and I think that if Sentinels go core, which I do want them to do because the mechanic's fun, and recombinators are fun, I think there should be some serious checks and balances on fractured items. Because that's something that, that the likes of us are doing, and are getting can get some really ridiculous stuff out of. But Casual Andy, who's just made it to red maps, doesn't have the resources to throw around to make 15 failed attempts.
So, just because it's also been brought up in chat, and I try to bring this up whenever we're talking about like casual players, there really is no definition for casual player. And there'll be people who've played 1 or 2 hours of League who are still in white maps right now who think I'm casual, and there are people who got to tier 16s in day 3 of a League and are currently running 1 mirror builds, but they only play a few hours of League, thinking I only play casual, I'm casual Andy, but they really know what they're doing. So that doesn't, there's the 2 extremes of cases, and both of those people might feel like they're casual. So when I talk about like a casual player, I rule it down to a specific kind of person. My basic ruling when I'm talking about casual players is I'm saying that you get to end tier maps, right? Like you're doing tier 16s during the league, and you're willing to do a little bit of research or watch a video here or there. That's the level of player that I talk about. Like you're not necessarily great, but you're able to get to red maps during a league, and you're willing to watch a stream here and there, or watch a video here and there, or look a little bit up on a website, like do a little bit of research. And if you're like at that level, that's the level I'm considering your casual Andy player.
Your prediction of this person at the moment would be that they could beat Scoured Phoenix with maybe not Deathless, and they could, if they did an Elked Phoenix, they'd fail a map 6 portals. Is that the sort of level you're thinking of?
Or they might be able to run an Elked Phoenix, but they might be re-alking, scouring that map, looking for mods that they could handle. There wouldn't be someone who could just be like, oh, I'm just going to roll. There's 20 of them and just blast them in a row. That's not a thing, right? Yeah, like that level of person, for me, that's casual Andy. That's how I describe them, because I think that level of player is the level of player that matters the most when it comes to talking about casual balance. At least that's how I feel about it, is because they're the people who have invested some time. They are willing to learn, but are still in the casual bracket. They are not 1%ers or anything.
Oh, there's a huge gap between 1%ers and casuals. Like, people underestimate how big the 1% is in this game now. Like, what's the ladder at the moment? Like, this is a game that has 30,000 concurrent players. Has 300,000 concurrent players at league start. So maybe 1.5 million players. The 1% are level 97 and up now. You're probably not in the 1%.
Yeah, I'd imagine it's probably twice as many players, because those numbers are usually from Steam, not Steam, Epic, and Standalone. Yep. So it's twice to 3 times.
They're like 280,000 concurrent. Is the numbers they gave in Ultimatum, was the last time they gave them. Peak concurrent players in Ultimatum, I think, was in the 28x000.
Yeah. So I wouldn't be surprised if since then the game's grown a lot, and we're looking at 3-4 million total players on a league start.
Since Ultimatum, I think the game's grown slightly since then. It's hard to say, but we might have seen 320,000 peak concurrent this league. That'd be my guess, like 10-15% larger. It's really obvious when there's a big rush of new players. Betrayal was the last massive one.
Can I just lead the topic back to Recombinators and say that they're awesome?
Yeah, they are.
I think that I don't know how much of the improvement for whatever group of casuals we're talking about when we say casual. There's certainly a lot of overlap. Like, no matter where you draw the line, there is a big portion of players that is the same when you refer to those. What I'm trying to say is, I don't know how much of the power gain that they get from them is because the pure power of it, or just because the system's so accessible and it actually incentivizes people engaging with the crafting system. Because
I think the people who gain the most from it are people who choose to engage with the crafting system.
Yeah.
Where I see a lot of people who are at the stage Balor was talking about in terms of casual, or even beyond it, who are still refusing to engage with recombinators and not really reaping the benefits beyond, well, I picked up a rare and it sold for 30C and I don't understand why. So I would say the people who benefit the most aren't necessarily casual or non-casual, but they're the people who specifically, as a result of recombinators, are willing to and choosing to engage with crafting.
Yeah, in some way.
Okay, so I have a question. If we introduce a system into the game like recombinators, and then players, certain groups of players, certain subclasses, whatever, choose not to engage with that at all, You're a player who gets a bunch of recombinators on the ground and just chooses to never look at them, never do any research, never do any experimentation, just not use them at all. Would it not then be fair to ignore that player's experience when it comes to how much the power they're getting out of recombinators? You're literally choosing not to use them. I think it's fair to not include that level of player in the conversation. They're not complicated. They're not hidden from use from casual players via obscurity. They do exactly what they say in the tin. We don't really know or understand the back end, but it's relatively simple to understand. And if you are choosing to not engage with it at all, then is it not fair to just not count them when we talk about how good they are for certain groups of people?
It comes down to impacts on balance in other areas. So let's take, for instance, a previous example of major power creep was influenced items. And let's take the original incarnation from 3.1, 3.2 era of influenced items that, this tremendously increased top-end power and was the primary reason that we saw the 3.9 triple and three-quarters increase to boss hit points. That was because of that power creep. It needed to happen, but the people who, for whatever reason, never learned anything about influenced items during that period, they suddenly found that 3.9, everything was much harder. Map bosses were much harder to kill. And this is a consequence of the fact there'd been so much power creep for players that did research, like that knew PoEDB, knew what the best mods were on a particular influence base. So in that sense, it did actually affect them, albeit somewhat down the line.
Yeah, I don't know whether it's fair to exclude people that don't engage with the system when you're trying to judge the impact of the system on the player base as a whole, because whenever they choose to not engage with the system, then there's also a reason that can be found in how the system is implemented or offered to them, explained to them, whatever. So I think we have to look at the people who don't use them as well, because there's a reason for them to not use them, right? Either they find it better to sell them, or there's not enough of a explanation in place in the game.
I think in terms of assessing where the system can be improved, that we do have to consider those people. But in terms of the second order effects, that's why a lot of the people who aren't using recombinators are also complaining that Arch Nemesis is still overtuned. There's a lot of power there, and they're choosing to not access it, so the game feels unfair to them because they don't realize they are limiting themselves.
And can we say there's a lot of systems like that? Like there's Timeless Jewels, there's Watcher's Eyes, there's a hell of a lot of systems that players have to learn league after league because all these things just remain in the game. Like Impossible Escape is a huge power boost this league. But one of the first things that I did when I was discussing the build I'm planning to play next was discuss the option of replacing a Thread of Hope with Impossible Escape. And it was just like, that's freed up a passive point, and it's also given the ability to take a great notable, and it's also removed a negative 10% resist penalty. That's something that's a simple little change to a build that's a huge boost. There's a bunch of other little bits of power as well that's concealed. Unnatural Instinct. If you're anywhere near the north end of the tree, it might not be for every build, but it's ridiculously power. It's a ridiculous source of power if you're near that area of the tree, or if you happen to be a Scion. There's all these things that a veteran player knows. They build this knowledge up over a long period of time, and for someone that's learning it, you need to learn these things 3 or 4 of these things a league.
And I think the way Tenkiei described it is maybe better than the way it's at least better communication than the way I described it. The player who's not interacting with it at all does matter. It only matters when we're talking about why aren't you using it and how can we improve it and make it more obvious when it's good to use and whatnot. But I was just more focused right then on that one, we're comparing how much power this player gets compared to how much power someone like me gets. And in that discussion, it feels like the people who don't use it at all just don't count. You're just not part of the... That's a different conversation, right? Like, we need to talk about why you're not using it and figure out how to make that better so that you do use it. But when we talk about how much power it's giving, you've opted out of that. So it's giving you nothing because you're not doing it, right?
Yeah, and I'm reminded of Synthesis a lot, because Synthesis had incredible power. Arguably as much as Unnerved Harvest. Most people never experienced that because it was very hard to engage with. And you needed to find a base that was basically mirror tier rarity to be able to get that incredible power. I was lucky enough to find one. It just dropped on the ground for me, and then I printed Onslaught boots and had money to do whatever stupid thing I wanted because the money was essentially infinite.
That was Fractured Fossils.
Yes. Although, even without being able to reuse the base, you could do some really stupid things because so few people knew and understood how to interact with the system.
Like, I found, my channel on YouTube got a lot of traction during Synthesis, and a big part of that was that I would just try to find crafts that were simple to replicate. I recall one of the things I did was Tier 1 flat energy shield implicit on Hubris Circlets. I found a way that you were 5 and 18 to make that with a 55C investment or so at the time. And I just made a video on how to do this. People were like, holy shit, you can actually do things with Synthesis. It's not some ridiculously over-the-top thing that only the most experienced crafters can use. It can actually be done pretty simply. I think one of the things with Synthesis that was so tricky was that the community back then weren't familiar with POEDB. And POEDB was absolutely essential. You really needed to know all of the limiting situations for Synthesis. But I do think Recombinators and Synthesis have a lot in common in terms of that they both destroy items. They both encourage crafting items to destroy them in order to get a result that's better than what would normally be available through normal mechanics in the game. I still don't think that Synthesis is anything like Original Harvest or 313 Harvest in terms of power. In fact, honestly, I don't think Synthesis added as much power even as 314 Harvest as compared to...
Nothing that's ever been put into the game added as much power as Harvest, in my opinion.
Top end, yeah. Casual Andy would never have got any of the rare Harvests, or may have got one of them and not realised it and wasted it on some low gear. But for the people that knew how to use it, Harvest was like the thing that took not just the top 1%, the top 3% of players and made them gain 50 character levels worth of power. Whereas for Casual Andy, it was like, here's an extra 3 or 4.
Yep. Here's a better res roll for your boots. Congratulations. Meanwhile, I'm running triple tier 1 influenced with tier 1 life, and I'm like, little bit too strong.
Yep. Yeah. When I say that it was equivalent, I think the difference that you hit on was Harvest was that disgusting for, let's say, 3% of the players, and Synthesis was that disgusting for 0.01%. That the people who got those god tier bases and could print all the money were able to abuse Synthesis to the point where it became game breaking, but if you didn't have one of those, you were just locked out of it entirely.
Again, that is Fractured Fossils, and primarily, and also to a lesser extent, Mirrors of Calandra were the reason for that. If item duplication via legitimate means didn't exist, then Synthesis would have that stuff would have been a lot weaker.
Yeah, that's very true.
Because if you got a set of Sorcerer boots that was 3 locked, one of the locked mods was 35% move speed, and you could afford to trade for Fractured Fossils and Abyssal Socket. What's the Abyssal Socket? Hollow Fossils. Fractured and Hollow Fossils. You could do the most disgusting things imaginable with Synthesis.
Yeah, it wasn't a Sorcerer base. It was, I think, an Armor base. But I had the pieces needed that when I cloned it, I could make either +1 Endurance Charge or Onslaught or both with a triple Fracture.
Did you have the 25% increased effect of abyssal sockets possible as well, or was that was another alternative which wasn't worth it?
I don't remember now. The only thing I remember about the base now is when I was done, when I had like 3,000 exalts, I didn't need money anymore. As a last send-off, I decided to sell the base. And I thought I was selling it to someone who was going to craft with it. And they used the original in an item, and I was very, very sad. I was like, man, I was trying to give back, leave a legacy, and now it's just gone.
Yeah.
Well, you could have explained it to them how it worked and what the plan is.
I was as they used it.
Yeah. Yeah, you just assume people know with items that are that rare and that are that expensive.
Yeah, I mean, he paid 1,200 exalts.
Makes
Like,
sense.
I thought he knew.
Maybe he already had an item like that. He is just like taking the competitors off of the market.
Maybe. Although, I was going back to World of Warcraft at the time, so I was already off the market either way.
He couldn't know that.
Fair.
Yeah.
Well, I think we covered a lot of ground. Have you guys mentioned your best recombinator craft? Like stuff that you can talk about, obviously. Don't give away your money-making secrets. Although, are there money-making secrets with recombinator crafting?
Tenkiei and I were talking about one on my stream earlier today, but, well, I say earlier today, I mean like 6 hours or so ago, that we both independently had the same idea for a video, which was getting item level 86 sorcerer gloves, rolling them with dense fossils, and then selectively recombinating them. And this seems like a really strong plan, in my opinion. You've got the miracle chance of getting Enlightened 4. Socketed Gems is supported by Enlightened 4. But you can also get the various energy shield mods together. So is it Resplendent Tier 1 flat ES and Unassailing Tier 1 percentage ES? You can get these two on separate items, then recombinate them onto the same item. And when I did a test run of this, I made a video that ended up just failing QA, so I didn't post it. But I think from 25 recombinators, I think I got one that was 200 ES with 2 strong resists. I didn't hit the Enlighten mod. That sold only for an Exalt. I probably should have charged more for it. And I had 2 that were in the 220 range ES, and a bunch of other stuff that just felt like it might sell for an Exalt. It's been sitting in my 1x tab for a while. So, like, this was a really cheap experiment that paid for itself just in the 200 ES 2 resist gloves, but would have hit something massive if I'd hit Enlighten 4 with the, well, even just Enlighten 4 with 1 ES mod would be fine. Benchcraft the other.
That does sound crazy. But yeah, no, ES items are definitely a great idea. Especially if you, I'm on outside of hitting the Enlighten, but if you hit the right prefixes together, then you can still work on the suffixes separately. I feel like that's like a step that a lot of people do when they use recombinator crafting, is that they first try to recombine prefixes together.
Yeah.
So that then in a further step, they could either combine it with an item that has the good suffixes, or just, re-roll the suffixes with Eldritch crafting or with prefix blocking and then Veiled Chaos, or depending on what you're looking for.
Prefixes tend to be rarer. That's not the case on gloves, but in many slots, the rarest mods that care about are prefixes. Fun fact, you can do this exact same thing with boots that have got life and movement speed. You can just get life on one item, movement speed on the other, recombinate, hope to hit one of the miracle mods, the stat stacking mods, but even if you don't, if you get life and ES together, you got a chance of something right.
Yeah. What I made, my 2 best items are both double fractured, because early on I did a lot of double fractured crafting. And the best one I'd say is my old helmet, which is the Fractured Delve, physical taken as elemental, combined with Fractured Tier 2 spell suppression. I did the math. you don't want to try to recreate that item. It is ludicrously expensive to try to recreate on a fractured base at this point. I also have boots, which are fractured 30% move speed, and fractured tier 2 spell suppression, which again, it's like 5x per attempt just for the spell suppression. You don't want to recreate it, and it's on an armor base. I did both in one try because I was very lucky and I had no idea what I was doing when I made the helmet, and it worked.
Yeah. I had one thing that I made that was gloves that I didn't have a real use case for this. This was when we were in the experiment phase with the stuff. I was trying to get 2 essence mods together on an item. So there's a Hysteria mod that adds a huge gob of fire damage to socketed gems, and there's something else that synergizes with that. Crit mod, I think, the crit essence mod. I was trying to get those 2 together, and I accidentally hit Empower 4 on them. So I didn't get all 3 mods. I got Empower 4, I got Hysteria, but I lost the other mod. And that was something that was pretty solid. I thought it might have sold for more, but I ended up only moving for 5x. I had it higher for a bit and it didn't get takers, so I was like, all right, let's just move this so that I've got some liquidity. And that, I think there's a lot of top end potential with some really crazy stuff when you've got pseudo links and some Recombinator exclusive mod.
Yeah. I really need to try and spam a whole bunch of stuff for one of those exclusive mods. I do really think that what you said with the dense fossil spam on the NES gloves is just such a great idea, but also like any hybrid base with just essence mods or something like that.
Yeah.
Would be great.
You can do lots of crazy stuff there. Also, like some of those Recombinator exclusive mods are just so powerful. Like Aura Effect Suffix on amulets is just nuts. One of the most powerful stats in the game at the moment, and it's a lot of it.
Yeah, funny story about that. It was 1 or 2, really early. I'd done a little bit of recombination with fractured stuff, and I told a friend. I was like, this is pretty cool, I don't really know how it works, you should try it. The first thing he makes is a double fractured amulet, and I believe it was T1 crit multi T1 life. He hits Aura Effect.
Wow.
Oh, that is just obscene.
That's really nice.
Yeah.
I think I've already rolled out of my first character, but my first character was wearing 4 double fractured items by like day 3. Double fracturing is probably my like favorite thing about the entire Recombinators. I love smashing fractured stuff together. It's amazing, but even like singled fractured gear is pretty good.
Yeah, fractured items have been a lot more powerful this league than they have been for a while. One thing that I think should be considered as a check and balance if they do keep these things around is, you know how they've got the split tag to prevent repeat use of split beasts? Mm-hmm. Now, you may have noticed that split beasts and recombinators sort of feel like opposites in some ways. Like, they're not exactly opposites. You applying both of them to the same, like splitting an item, then recombinating the pieces is more in line with just throwing a couple of annuls at the item at random. But there is this sort of feeling that you're going back to where you started. And what I think they could consider as a check and balance against some of the extreme top-end use of recombinators is making it so that there's a combined tag, that if an item has the combined tag, it can't be recombinated. The recombinators apply it, but the split tag and the combined tag cancel each other out. So if an item has both split and combined, then splat, they're both gone. It'd be something that would severely restrict some of the very top-end stuff, but for your more casual players that are just trying to mash together 2 items that have got good mods on them, they'll still have the full functionality.
I feel like it would have the exact opposite effect of that. And I can explain why. For me, if I'm grabbing, let's say I just want to throw double fracture bases together, right? Like I want to make myself some double fracture stuff. When I'm doing that, I'm usually doing it at 2x a base, 4x an attempt. If that's going to cost me an extra 40 attempts because I have to buy more bases, I don't care. It doesn't mean anything. It's just money.
The thing, though, is you couldn't reuse any because you could never split those.
Right, but I would be able to recombine them once, and then they would get a recombine tag, and then not be able to use them again, right? And like, that's fine, but I'm just gonna burn more money. I'm the kind of player that I'm in that 1%, and the answer is it doesn't matter how much something costs. That's the reality. All you've done is turn it from, okay, it's an item that would be worth 20x when it's finished, and now you've made it an item worth 200x when it's finished. But I'm still going to make it if I need it for my build. It's not going to affect me at all. That makes no difference. I don't care. Whereas what that's actually done is made it so that less experienced people, more casual players, are no longer able to take full use of this system because they combined a 30C item with a 50C item that they were hoping would work, and now they've bricked both of them, and it cost them most of their Exalt, which was all they made today, and now they don't want to do it again. Whereas it hasn't really impacted me.
You're missing something, though. You're stopping at 2 fractures. Yeah. And the most powerful abuse cases of these are not stopping at two mods on an item. They are crafting 4 or 5 mods onto an item with the recombinators. I don't think that the 2 specific mods, is that ridiculous. Like, it's powerful, it's a small amount of power creep, but it's in line with the power creep that you get from, say, a Timeless Duel.
Yep, that's what I was going to say, that the difference is you can't get a 3 or 4 fractured item with the tag being added.
I mean, it feels like a better solution to that, if that was the real problem, would be just to cap fractures. You can just cap fractures.
Merciless flaring dictators' weapons have never been cheaper to make than they are now.
True. Isn't that a good thing? Because I can make them every league. I can make them without recombinators, and I can do them again. But they're now in a price range that somebody with 1/10 of my money can make it.
Which means monsters have to get stronger so that if you don't have one, you're punished even more severely than before.
Yeah, that's the issue with any top-end power creep, because you've got not just the power creep that affects like the top 50 economic powerhouse players in the league. You've also got the power creep of the next 20,000 players, and that's where I think that is the group that I think are getting a lot from recombination. Maybe not 20,000, maybe 50,000. Next, the top 50,000 that aren't the top 50, that sort of tier of players are the ones that are gaining an enormous amount from it. And ultimately, that does get reflected in monster buffs down the line. And the most powerful mod the item that's been created with fractures. Okay, granted this was done in standard, but the most powerful item that's been created with recombinators was a 5 fracture item. And it was nuts.
Yeah, okay, but
force a 6 mod to be a specific essence mod.
Haven't we seen, like, I don't know, at this stage, 200,000 6 tier 1 standard items? Like, I don't know if standard is relevant about these things. Those people can burn through 40, 50, 60 mirrors making a single item. Like,
I think about 200 on this one, because they were mirroring items to use as inputs into the craft.
Yeah, so that's hundreds of mirrors. Like, items like that, here's the thing, I think items like that should exist.
I
This
agree.
is like 5 legacy mods on it.
But items like that should only exist in standard, and the issue is this is a herald of what could be coming in the future of Arch Nemesis. That if this went core, we could start seeing these in League. Or at the very least, we'll start seeing things like, why does my Lightning Strike or Spectral Helix Raider feel bad? Well, do you have a 3 times tier 1 claw? No, I have tier 3. I'm in solo self-found. Sorry, unless you have 3 times tier 1, you just don't have the damage to deal with monsters, because they were buffed because recombinators make it really easy to get 3 times tier 1.
Okay. But you've just said solo self-found. Well, merge to trade. Like, the game isn't balanced around solo self-am. What do you mean? Like, that's not... That's an extra restriction you put on yourself. That's not a way to...
Maybe that was a bad example, because I could replace "well, I'm solo southbound" with "well, I'm poor, well, I'm new, well, I don't have the money to make the, let's just say, 10x it costs me to do the 3 times tier 1 claw, which is much cheaper than the 100x it used to be, but still out of reach of some players, and now that's the minimum power level that you need to be viable in tier 16 maps, because the game has been balanced around it, and we're in 321.
Yeah. I definitely see that point where I feel like it's not even the newer players or the bottom end players that I'm concerned with, but it's like if the triple tier 1 essence or tier 1/essence, because they're different tiers, but the triple essence prefix claw is the standard go-to claw for a build, then there's just also very little potential for the people who play a build for like 8 weeks, 9 weeks to still improve beyond that, right? Like the great thing about the game being pretty much balanced around you not having super perfect gear, but like 70-80% perfect mods, is that there's always this perspective, this outlook that you could get something that's even just a slight upgrade, but is still significant in the grand scheme of things. Because, yeah, I mean, it is an upgrade after all.
Yeah, you do hard to upgrade further. Waterberg's point in chat though is really good. Like, the problem is that the game scales up to tier 16 maps, and so much of endgame only happens in 14, 15, 16. That's been the case since 3.9, that the player that is, like, the sort of player that is just getting to red maps for the first time. There was a period in Path of Exile's history where, like, when I first got to red maps, like, you know, I would do a couple of tier 12 maps a league, but I would mostly spend my time in tier 7, 8, 9 because they were the comfortable maps. Tier 12 was like, I want to go out of my way, have a hard map for a bit, and that's going to be tough. But when I was running the tier 7, 8, 9, all of the content except for, like, working towards Uber Elder was still present. Actually, Uber Elder wasn't quite in the game yet. So all the content except the Shaper Guardians was present. And I was able to explore all of the endgame. Nowadays, you have this situation where in order to explore most of the endgame storylines, you have to be in tier 14, 15, 16 maps. But there's nothing past that except for unsustainable things like, you know, trade-gated Delirium Orb maps. And that's one of the things that's really awkward. Without trading for content that's beyond that, you can't sustain anything past 16. And so you're forcing different players that shouldn't be doing the same tier of maps into the same tier of maps. You've got someone who's come home from work, wants to kick back and relax with, you know, with their 3.5 exalts worth of gear, maybe have a beer and just have some relaxed mapping. They should be playing a different tier of content to someone that's like, all right, I'm going to focus and I'm going to punch through this with my powerful character. You know, Delirium Orb sort of fudge it, but you can't sustain them.
Okay. Alright, so I definitely understand that. But I have a question. Why is the idea of, like, trade gating, say, behind Delirium Orbs? Like, I run 60% Delirious maps to up the difficulty of the content. Why is that necessarily a bad thing if you want to go over what I would consider your endgame maps to be, like, the baseline of mapping, right? Like, you've made it to your tier 14 to 16 maps, and now you're engaging in all the content. Now, if I want to go above that baseline, I do have to do a little bit of trading to keep up with it. Why is that necessarily a bad thing? Because
builds are so powerful in this game that you reach the point where you need to go beyond tier 16 relatively fast.
Like, which parts of this are fun? Messaging 16 people, hi, I'd like to buy your 3 Thaumaturge's Delirium Orbs, and eventually 3 of them reply, and that process takes 3.5 minutes, or actually blasting through your map. One of these is
decision.
So?
Well, that's a decision, though. You don't have to do that.
No, you don't, but you reach the point where the fun is gated behind this make work. Now, there's always make work in Path of Exile, like, you know, rolling a map, for instance, and just going, is there anything I can do on this? But it's all quick, except when trade's involved. and like you got stuff like scarabs as well are another offender of this. I would like to see a situation where you keep all content in the game available at tier 16, but you perhaps introduce 9 or 10 more tiers. These would be less sustainable, and you would start to, you're running a 16, you'll sometimes get a 17. You won't always. You run a 17, sometimes you get an 18, sometimes you won't. It'd be like Map Sustain was back in, say, pre 2.4, so 2.3 era, where the higher tiers don't really get sustained, but you'll have the ability to mostly run these higher tiers, drop back occasionally when you run out, and these would be something where just monsters have higher stats, so it's a challenge for players that are finding tier 16s too easy. And then at that point, GG can then keep all the main systems 14 and up.
So what I hear when you describe that system is that you've just introduced a new thing I need to trade for constantly, because I'm never going to do below tier 25 or whatever. So now I have to buy tier 25 maps as well. Probably one at a time.
Like, I remember back in, say, 3.1, 3.2, when I was starting to break into tier 16s, at the start of a league, sure, I would buy a bunch of tier 14s off someone, and then I would run them all. Then around the 15s that I got from them, I would sell all my 16s. Broadly speaking, I just sold any 16 I got. This is my strategy usually if I wanted a Headhunter in a league. That'd be how I'd fund it. Would be buy a bunch of 14s in bulk and then turn around and sell them. Sell the 16s that drop. And just otherwise, I'd be running 14s and 15s and 14s again, and then the odd 13 when I ran out. Broadly speaking, I would sustain 14, maybe with the occasional dip down. And then I would continually be selling this higher tier consumable to people that were further in progression than me. And that was working fine.
I'm gonna say the thing next that gets everybody on Reddit mad at me, but that's fine. Here's my hot take. Not only is trade and PoE improving significantly league by league, extra functionality, better when it's not down, when the website's not down, it's getting significantly better every single league. Not only that, even before it started improving, like a year, 2 years ago, it's the single best trading system in any game I have ever played. It is not perfect. There are plenty of problems with it. I could make a whole 20-minute video about how to improve it and what could be better and whatnot. But just point for point compared to any other game I've ever played in my life, literally the best trade system.
So where's the hot take?
I mean, it'll be replied in the comments, I promise. People are not going to be happy to hear that.
Zoe's saying in chat, TFT is the solution to 99% of the Reddit complaints, but people are stubborn. And also the thing is that Reddit hates TFT. And every time there's a scammer that gets banned from TFT, they tend to go and post a hate thread on Reddit, and these just get upvoted tremendously. There was two posts that were made by someone who was caught scamming, who was banned from TFT for scamming, with quite good evidence. They got an alt account on Reddit, but they made a couple of mistakes that let it be tracked down to who they were, and they got like thousands of upvotes because people just hated TFT in it. And then it turned out that actually no, everything they said, like the whole purpose of this post was to get people who use TFT somewhere else that they could be scammed again by the same person. And then there was another one that was made where someone had been banned from TFT for genuine harassment of a mod. Now, I don't say that taking the mod's word. I looked at the screenshots of Discord chat that they posted, and that was enough to show that this ban was completely reasonable. And they posted this in the Path of Exile subreddit, and like the subreddit went mad at TFT again. And I was just looking at this, and it's like, hang on, are you not reading the evidence here that this guy was banned quite reasonably for harassing a mod, for threatening to get an online lynch mob onto them, and it was so bad that they were probably going to get banned from PoE over it, like for harassing another Path of Exile community member. Like it was that bad, and they got a huge amount of upvotes for it. It was really funny. I didn't really like TFT that much as a guild, but they're honest and they're effective as a service. Like, they're just a service provider that I use. Same as I'll I'll use
It's also
Amazon.
like a local chicken takeaway. I don't like their employment practices. I don't like the company, but they provide a reasonably good service. I'll use them. TFT are the same, except not as bad.
It's also really important to point out to people who have never used TFT before, systems like TFT have existed in every game from like Diablo 1 onwards. It's just that at the time, it was slower and there were less checks. But it was essentially forum trading, and that's where we went and did everything. And that's literally all TFT is. It's just forum trading, except the speed and convenience have been brought up, and now there are checks and balances and people you can trust and you know, punishments if you're a scam artist. And like now we can do it with relatively safety at a much quicker pace. But it's literally just forum trading, which has existed in every game that has an online component for the last 20 years. This isn't new. This isn't exclusive to PoE. Like, this is the same system we've been using for 20, 30 years. Just made better and streamlined. That's all.
I think the big difference is the visibility. Because in the past, a lot of the well-moderated forum trading systems were in regards to RMT, which was against the rules of the game. So people never saw the system. There are some systems that functionally had a cryptocurrency. It wasn't called that, but it worked like one. They had moderation. They had people to act as intermediaries on the trades, all to support RMT for games like Diablo 2, RuneScape, World of Warcraft, EVE, EverQuest, you name it. But it was all in the shadows. People didn't see it. And what makes people so uncomfortable is the fact that TFT is just trading in-game currency for in-game currency. So it happens right out in the open, and everyone sees exactly how it's always worked.
Yeah, except there's no RMT Empire getting
this one's legal. Yeah.
Might be some individuals RMTing around the edges, but they are, you know, like they're driven out if they're found. Like
which is why I say game currency for game currency.
Yeah. I think the comment about TeamSpeak and Ventrilo in small groups, that was an interesting time in online gaming. One thing I did find really difficult with TFT though, when it started gaining a presence, was that I don't know if it's still a case. On my old PC, Discord would be a resource hog when I was playing Path of Exile, and I was getting a lot more game crashes. So I would therefore not keep Discord open. I would only open it while I actually wanted to interact on TFT, and that was an absolute pain.
I mostly started using it in Harvest because they had the website, which basically just worked like the trade site. That was great. And that's where I first found TFT. I still very rarely sell on TFT. I mostly just buy. As someone who doesn't really care about mirror tier items, I'm probably never going to mirror an item unless I am selling a copy of my item to someone else, because I'd rather just make something 95% as good and know that I made it and probably make a disgusting profit while doing it. For someone like me, it's great. There's never going to be a downside. I can see some people's arguments if you are trying to create mirror tier items that there are downsides on having that much wealth centralized. But again, if it wasn't TFT, it would be someone else. And if it wasn't TFT, you just wouldn't know who it is. So I still don't have a problem with it.
I don't have a problem, like a real problem or anything. It's just that I would rather that it was less centralized, but it's centralized because trust-based systems work better if they're centralized. You could conceivably have 3 or 4 communities that shared scam alerts.
As a side note, they also do share, TFT does also share their scam alerts with the pathofexile.com/trade. There's an extension that you can get. I forget its name, unfortunately, but you can just add it to the website, and if you go to message someone who's been banned off TFT,
you get a
warning. It doesn't work.
You can do it, but you're given a warning first. I think there's a couple of different ones. There's a couple of different trade warning things like this.
For the people in chat, it used to work like that with Better Trading. The Better Trading does not have that anymore, but TFT has their own extension that still does the same thing.
Yeah, Better Trading and TFT now are competitors, whereas they used to be partners.
I had a question earlier, linking back the Recombinator crafting topic to the Sentinel rewards, where I was wondering, like, because I don't usually play Trade League, how good is the availability of specific fractures in softcore trade normally? Because I feel like a lot of them are dropping from the Sentinel rewards, which we wouldn't normally have. I mean, there are some drop from heist, right?
Definitely feels like there's a lot more than normal.
There's Expedition and Heist drop a bunch of them, and also, like, it's more that people are picking them up now because they've got additional utility. Every loot filter has at least, like, whatever sound you make for an Awakened Sextant, that's the sound that you put on a lot of random fractures. And as a result, that means that people are looting them. Whereas in some past leagues, they've had them hidden.
Also, I would only pick up fractured items on tier 1 bases before, because, like, what do I care if it's a fractured life roll on a base that I was never going to use? But now that fractured thing can be put on any base I want, so I'm IDing all fractured items instead of just the good base ones. So that's good.
Yeah, I think there's more availability because more people are picking them up. There's also less availability of certain things due to competition. In the past, if I wanted a fractured base for an item, there was a pretty good chance that I would pay about 20 chaos for it on a tier 1 base because nobody wanted to craft on an item level 83 item. Yeah. Now you can force that item level up by recombinating it. Now you can force that fractured mod onto something else by recombinating it. And so that same base that I paid 20C for is now 5 exalts or 4 exalts, which also means if you have those fractured items on your filter, something that before was a once in a league and you get 20 chaos event is now a once in a league and you get 4 or 5 exalts, which makes a meaningful difference for most players.
Yeah. What has changed for the worse? Like, if you're someone who wanted to just get a reasonable fractured item in order to to make a craft that's good enough for the moment, like good enough to be an upgrade early on, that's going to be more expensive than it used to be. Something like an amethyst ring with 12 off perfect life fractured on, that's something that would have been very affordable to make an early upgrade in a previous league. Nowadays it's not. But that's just the case now.
Now the easy, cheap option is to buy 2 rings that only cost a chaos each and recombine them together.
Yeah, that's the way that people in the know are doing it. Although that information is percolated and is spread through the economy now.
Yeah, because I was just wondering whether the fractured recombination would actually be fine if there's just a lot fewer fractured items and the access is worse to them. But
no, that means the top end gets a insurmountable advantage.
Yeah, true.
Yeah. I think RNG fractures are fine. One thing that's of note is that locked mods that require high level bases are very, very rare as fractures. Like a +3 locked minion helm, I think can only be made by Harvest. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I can't think of a way to get that as an item drop at the moment.
Uber Cortex, I think, can
armor reward from a Sentinel in an Abyss with Lightless Legion.
That would work too.
But there's not many.
Yeah, and I do think that Uber Cortex can also hit 86. And I think that Uber Cortex can drop fractured items, but I could be remembering wrong.
Does it drop fractures? I think it's a synthesis mod. Let me just check the synthesis mods.
I feel like you're right, but this is very much not me being fact-checked at all yet, so could be wrong.
No, it doesn't seem to be a synthesis mod. So there's no mod for, say, synthesized rare monsters have a 5% chance to drop a fractured item or something like that.
Recently, when I was doing some synthesis maps, I got a fractured item. I just don't remember.
Oh, is it from the node on the... There's a passive tree node, I think, that does it.
That might be it. I
Might be
couldn't
that.
remember the context.
Might also be the chests, but for some reason you can definitely get a lot of fractured items running those.
Yeah, but for it to be 86, it would have to drop from a boss specifically, I believe. Boss or rare, but a chest would only be 85.
No, it'd be 87 if it dropped from a boss.
Magics would be okay too.
Yeah, so magic, rare, boss could all do 85 or 86 plus for the minion helmet to fracture.
Sentinel with armor awards in an abyss that's empowered by +3 tiers is the main way though.
Yeah.
Probably. The most accessible for sure.
Very accessible, yeah. Oh, and someone's saying synthesized maps can have +6 eye level on items if you use the Atlas node that doubles map mods.
I am. True.
Good point, yeah. Thanks, Sam.
Right, so is there anything that you guys still wanted to talk about that we haven't gotten into yet? I went a little bit silent there in the second half because you had me constantly sitting there and having my mind blown with all the stuff that I don't usually think about. Because yeah, it's just so outside of my experience of PoE. Well, yeah, is there anything you guys think we should still go over? I think we covered everything that I'd wished to cover, plus a lot more. That's why I'm asking.
Yeah. What about silly farming strategies? Like, not necessarily talking min-maxed ones, just things that you think might be a bit zany and fun. Come up with something quick on the fly.
I ran 3 Sentinels the entire league, and then just recently I was like, well, people have been telling me Apex are shit, so I'm just gonna take Apex off and buff the Pandemonium Sentinels instead, and can use them twice, and that really seemed a lot better. Being able to empower, I mean, the good Pandemonium Sentinels have 200 plus enemies, so it's a lot of buffs that you can get out, but that's nothing crazy or out of the ordinary. I think that's what most people have been doing.
I would do grand design and then stack the infused harvest crafts to get as many things in my map that scale off of pack size as possible. Because I believe you can get one for shrines.
Wait, explain. What? I'm not sure I understood that. Grand design is the Atlas passive?
Yes, the Atlas passive that gives you 1% pack size per notable. Shrines spawn packs of enemies around them.
Right, guaranteed packs, right.
Infused domination, you get a ton of shrines with a ton of packs.
And then you make them just as big as possible.
Yep.
Yeah. We did some grand design trees. I made a grand design video as well. They're still not probably not the best to do for anything, but they're way more interesting and way more safe than a lot of other options as well. It's also been my suggestion for if you're really struggling to level up, you can take a grand design tree and you can still get quite a lot of juice and quite a lot of rewards without quite a lot of the difficulty. A lot of the difficulty gets taken away because a lot of the difficulty came from the minor nodes that don't do anything anymore, but you still get a free 35% pack size in every map, so now you can get XP.
I think
that's really cool.
The real rewarding thing would be grand design, expedition sextant, gilded or winged expedition scarabs, because expedition in your maps does scale off of pack size. And then you roll the juiciest 110% plus quant map you can find, and you put fortune favors on top.
Yep.
That's cool. I still reckon Apex Sentinels on Maven 10 ways. It's this is not a good strategy, but if you want to laugh, try it.
They buffed Apex Sentinels, right? They made it so that they get like +1 enemy base. So what's the maximum you can have on those now? 6, 7?
6 for Scoured, I think, and more with mods, I think. I think the Recombinator only one is 6. It was 5 and is now 6.
Nice. That's a good amount.
Yeah, it's like one of the things with Apex Sentinels that's a bit clunky with them is that you feel like you want to use them on the map boss, and they do give a lot of rewards on the map boss, but the map boss fights can be quite slow because they add so many extra effective hit points that you then have a bit of a time race to kill the map boss, then get out and find a few rares afterwards. And that's particularly a problem in tiers 14, 15, 16, where the map bosses are a bit tankier. And so you want to keep that in mind. Like one of the things I've been doing is I'll pop an Apex Sentinel a couple of screens before the map boss room if I know where it is, like an atoll or something like that. And then I'll tag a couple of rares, hoping that I've still got one charge left for the boss, or at least one, but ideally as close to one as possible.
I was running Metamorph nodes for a while, so I'd always be able to do the Metamorph right after the map boss, or even 2 Metamorphs right after the map boss, so that's what I use my charges for. The problem is if you don't kill the Metamorph fast enough, the first one, then it spawns a whole bunch of rares. And, I mean, that's great, because that's extra loot, extra XP and stuff, but then that also depletes your Apex Sentinel charges. And then you may not have charges left for the last Metamorph, when you get the node where you can assemble a second Metamorph.
Oh, yeah.
But that's...
You say...
I wouldn't recommend that for anyone. Like, maybe, yeah, summoner builds can deal with the Metamorphs quite well, but, like, for everyone else, it's just hell. They're already so much more tanky than the average map boss, and then with the Metamorph nodes from the tree, you buff them by so much.
See, you say rares, I say walking buffs. If you play a base Fizz build and wear a Headhunter, I guarantee you will be able to deal with any Metamorph.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I should definitely roll another build, but I'm already level 98 on the Necro, and even though it's a pain to farm on it, I think I could just push this one to 100 and do all the stuff with it. I'm just worried I'll take too much time out of my progression with this character if I roll another one.
Are you at 98.00 or at 98 point something that you don't want to lose?
No, I'm currently 98.0 because I did some silly things, but I think I could easily get to 99 still. And 100, I've never done 100, but in softcore trade, you got so many like safe options to get shitloads of XP, right?
Do some silly stuff now, just...
Oh, I did a bunch of silly stuff.
Allocate, don't take... Is it Wandering Path that turns off the notables?
Yes.
Don't take Wandering Path and do a Uber Cortex. Do some silly stuff like that.
Speaking of Uber Cortex, I went to do one earlier for showcasing my Corrupting Fever Gladiator. It made me very angry because I got increased AoE and turbo. Which is... it's probably the worst thing I could have done because that automatically doubles. It bricked... And then I put in the next one and it's like less curse effect. Monster damage. Oh, why couldn't that have been the Uber one? I could have looked so much better. But no.
Oh wait, you unspec'd the Uber node for in between because you were worried that the next one would also break?
Yes, because I was like, oh right, if it rolls AoE, it's just a brick. I forgot this.
Have you done a whole lot of the Uber fights, all the different Uber fights?
Not a whole lot. I've watched a couple. I went into Uber Eater completely blind, way too early. I do not advise doing that without gear, by the way. Then I did, most recently, a Uber Cortex. I forget what else I did. I haven't done a ton. There's a good chance that I'm going to make a boss at some point, and there's a good chance I'm just not going to because right now they're more of a do-it-once thing, and I'm not sure that deserves a dedicated character.
I do want to get them all down myself, this league.
Yeah. My next character is going to be like a proper bosser. Like a disgusting one. And I want to do like 20 to 50 of every one of them just to like learn them and get a really good feel for them. And then I'll probably never do them again because really, let's be honest.
Wait, hold on. I'm changing the server. This is absolutely terrible. I thought it was going to fix itself, but the longer it went on, it was worse and worse. I'm going to try a different region. Holy shit, that was bad. So, you're going to do 20 to 50 of them and then never do them again?
Yep.
Wait, why do you want to learn them if you never want to do them again?
Same reason I ran Heist for 2 leagues, so that I have a decent idea of how it works and how they all function, so I can help people when they ask questions, so I know the answers to things when questions are asked of me. Basically just that. It's literally just so I can actually be useful and answer the questions. That's the only reason I need to know them.
Partake in the
because my content is juice maps.
Yeah, knowledge is why I'm going to do them as well. It's just I don't know that I need a dedicated character where I can probably brute force them on another good build that's kind of okay for it.
True.
Yeah, in softcore you don't need a dedicated bosser, but you do need to, like, you can't do them on a character that's bad at bossing, that's actively bad at bossing.
Yeah, my current character is worthless at bossing. Without buffs or anything, he has like a 24k maximum hit. He's got 1.9k life and only does about 600,000 DPS.
My current character is not amazing at bossing, nor is it terrible. Feared, really smooth and easy. Anything beyond Feared, I just don't have a recovery, because I'm playing Corrupting Fever Gladiator, and I didn't focus enough on recovery for Uber bosses.
I don't think I could run Shaper on my current build.
600,000 DPS, he'll trivialize Shaper.
1.9k life with no other defenses.
You don't need to get hit in Shaper.
I don't think you're familiar with how bad of a player I am.
Okay, you've got 6
I know stuff and I play a lot. I don't dodge. My eyes are not a defensive. I need to be able to get hit, or I just die. Didn't
you say 24,000 max hit suffered?
That's against trash in Path of Building.
What about against Shaper balls that have 25% penetration of cold?
I probably die to a single ball. I would expect to die to a single ball.
Aren't you suppression capped?
No, that comes from the Headhunter.
Oh, never mind. If you're suppression capped, I'd say it would take 2, because you are using petrified blood.
Everything comes from the Headhunter.
But without suppression, yeah, you're probably going to die to 1.
And the other thing is that if you get hit by 1, they do stun.
I am stun immune and ailment immune, which is like...
Okay.
I'm also immune to hinder and maim and corrupting blood. And basically anything I can be immune to that might slow down my mapping experience, I'm immune to it.
Yep.
But I don't care about life or like normal defenses because the Headhunter does all of that. Like I don't care about any of that. Don't even really care about damage because the Headhunter does all of that. It just became immune to as much as I could so that I didn't have to stop mapping.
Yeah, so I did try Uber Cirrus once. I didn't do the other Uber bosses, but I'd watched Steelmage do Uber Awakener on the HCSSF raids, so I had seen a little bit of the fight, and then I got my character into a state where I felt ready to do some bosses, and I also farmed out some Awakener sets. And then I did one regular one because I was like, I haven't done this fight in so long. And it was just an absolute joke. And then allocated the node and did the Uber thing. And honestly, I think with a little bit better prep and a little bit more knowledge of the fight, I couldn't have done it. It just becomes very rough in the last phase with the ground degen. But honestly, it's just so much more fun than the base version of the fight, that even if it means pissing my sets away, I'll just keep going in and trying that one because I don't know. It's just such an
exactly
improvement.
my mindset with the Black Star last league. Was like, this was a very early fight and progression, but just that quest version of the Black Star, I was like, no, I don't care. I'm just going to keep trying this. I'll throw attempts at it. I'll learn it. I'll work it out. And it's so much fun to do that. And, when you're later in progression, the whole idea of throwing away, what's the series set now? 100 chaos or so?
I don't know.
Less?
About that, yeah.
Like, throwing away 700 chaos later in progression is fine, for a bit of fun, and also for a lot of practice with the fight.
Yeah, usually what I'll do when I want to practice something is I won't do one of them as I get them. I'll do 5 of them, 10 of them, however many, until I feel like I can comfortably do it deathless, or until I just don't care about doing it deathless anymore because I know I can, and it's just easier to not. Which I did in 3.14 a lot because I was a Poison Blade Fall Blade Blast. And so I'd poison everything I'm feared, and then I'd just get up and go get a drink. I'd come back dead and collect all my loot because they're dead too.
Yeah, sounds great.
Yeah, I wouldn't say Righteous Fire is a great build for Uber Maven. So many things that suppress your regen in there.
Uber Maven, it's not all the other Ubers, though. It is one of the best builds I can think of to learn the
Amazing
fights.
recovery. All of the unavoidable damage or the near unavoidable damage. And you've got solid damage, like the Fire Trap setup is great.
Yep, and solid damage projection from the Fire Trap, which is really important on some of the Ubers.
Yeah, like Cortex.
Yes.
It's like, all right, I'm going to kill you, and I'm going to kill your friend over there as well.
All right, so if they keep adding, and that's what they said, like every new league, every new expansion that they do right now will focus on endgame, or at least have some focus on endgame. So assuming that we get more Uber versions of existing content, what is something that you would be looking forward to seeing an Uber version of?
Uber Crystal King, because it's a really, really well-designed fight. It's already difficult due to mods. I'm very curious what they would do to make it the Uber version, and I hope it's not just giving him a mandatory turret phase.
Yeah, Uber All would be interesting. I was going to suggest something that's a little bit out of left field here, but a heist equivalent of Blight Ravage maps. I like heist, except for the fact that you reach a point where you outgear it, and then there's no challenge left in the content, and that means there's no fun. Now, not every player gets to that point, but experienced players will reach that point reasonably early in progression, probably about the time that they're Cyrus ready, maybe a little bit after being Cyrus ready, maybe by the time they're Uber Elder ready. They will be at the point where you can just waltz through a heist, and there's no real excitement to the fights. It's all just wait at the door, collect loot, wait at the door, collect loot. But when you aren't that powerful, like if you go into a heist and you with a character that's, say, Uber Elder capable but only just, and you take 3 support gems out, then you find you are getting constantly overwhelmed and you're under incredible pressure from mobs. Now, in that environment, mimicking that environment, that feel of I am struggling a lot with this content, but doing it in a way that makes it interesting, I think that would be really cool. And the way I'd implement it would just simply be level 86 heists that drop, blueprints only, that drop already corrupted and with 8 mods, and that have an extra implicit of monsters take 70% less damage, like the Uber bosses. That way you'd reach a point where you're getting overwhelmed often. Eventually you could outgear it as well, but that's the point where you're basically done with the league. We already have an Uber beach here, Doom. It's added in Harvest.
Yeah.
I want the next thing to not be bosses, that's all. Just because I'm so not a bosser. I want it to be. I want to give me harder maps somehow. Harder,
Uber
more
Coward's
challenging
Trial.
maps. Give me something.
So
like
give me
delirium orbs right now are the only way I have to scale my maps up enough to be difficult. Right? Like there's no other option. I would like something else to add or Even higher tiers of maps would be fine. I don't really care. I don't have solutions. I just want. They already did bossing. I'd like to see something for mapping. That's all.
Can I say one thing on on the sort of idea of Ubers as well? Like they've run these events for league start first kills. I think are a fantastic thing. I reckon it'd be really interesting though if they didn't have first 7 as the prizes, but if they went like 7 people will be chosen at random out of the people who beat it by deadline X, or maybe dead first, dead second, and then 5 at random. Be quite interesting, like, making it something that more people compete in, seriously. Because at the moment, there's only about 50 people that can conceivably win that race.
Yeah.
Well, I'm just gonna say Uber Poop Boss. Because I just want to see people rage more about that fight. That fight has so many haters, so many people dislike it. Or have a strong dislike for it. And I don't think it's that bad, but there's some minor gripes that I have with it. And obviously it's designed to feel bad, with the grasping vines and the degens and the hard-hitting monsters underground and shit. It's definitely... It does a good job at giving you a bad feeling. And if that's the goal, then I'd have to say it's a well-designed fight. And I'm curious to see what they would do to make it Uber. Because that's what I really like about the new Uber fights, is that they didn't just go and make them like numerically superior, but they went in and made new mechanics for all of those. And specifically in the Cirrus fight, which is the one that I have personally experienced a lot, and also firsthand, I think it just adds to the fight. Previously, it was just like 2/3 snooze fest until the last phase, and then you'd finally get to play some, and now it's fun throughout the entire fight. There's still a ramp up. It's not the same fight the entire time, but it's definitely not something to shrug off in the first half of the fight, which is cool.
You'll like Uber Cortex, Cat.
Will I?
If you don't get AoE on it, you'll like it.
Okay, I'll give it a try. Well, great. I think we're way beyond the 2-hour mark, actually approaching the 3-hour mark. We should round things off here, but obviously I'd love to give you guys the chance to plug any sort of projects that you're currently busy with, any sort of content that's coming up soon that people should be looking forward to. You got anything cooking up right now, Sirgog?
I was in the process of writing a Diablo Immoral review. And the T is missing deliberately there. So I was in the process of writing that script for that before this started. After that beta cheat fiasco that I was experimenting with, I thought, give it a fair go, but I didn't have high expectations. I will say that the game tremendously undershot my low expectations and was an absolute stinker and has killed the Diablo franchise for me. As someone that loved Diablo 2, it is now as dead as Game of Thrones was after Season 8. The whole franchise, like D4, no, not interested at all.
That's rough. Yeah, no, I personally wasn't really interested before that. But yeah, I guess D2 went reasonably well, so totally see why people would build up some sort of expectation for Immortal, but I thought it was really going to be bad, and like you said, it's even worse than I expected. Terrible. How about you, Tenkiei? What's coming up next?
I also just finished a review of Diablo Immortal. I also expected it to at least have proper PC porting. It didn't, so that was a nice surprise.
Yeah.
The next thing is trying to figure out a build to play, because I don't really know what I want to do, and the problem is there's not enough new stuff that I haven't done in some form or another. So I'm thinking I might try to lean into the Arch Nemesis mods and make something to abuse Headhunter, since that's kind of new. And aside of that, I'm going to be making some videos on Recombinators, since those are also new and very, very fun.
Looking forward to those. That sounds great. Balor, What's coming
stuck.
next?
I'm not buying a Mage Blood. I'm also not buying Mage Blood cards, and I insist that my next build will be a Mage Blood build. So it needs to come off the floor, either on the floor or via cards, and I'm stuck here until that happens.
Well, we've already watched you pick up one card on the background footage during the podcast.
Yes, that is the first card, and I've been doing it for 5 straight days. In full Delirious, double Beyond juice, full MF gear, and everything.
Still a good return, though.
I don't know if it takes 5 more days. I found a raw Headhunter on the ground before I found a Mage Blood card. So I'm going to have a lot of money by the time it's done, but I refuse to buy cards and I refuse to buy the belt. I'm going to find my own belt from the floor. I'm either going to build it from cards or
Mage Blood.
It's going to be there. But that's how it's happening.
Good luck with that.
Yep.
Sounds fun, at least, and something to grind towards. As for myself, I think I'll be trying to min-max the Necromancer a little bit further. The Skeleton Mages, maybe make another +1 Skeletons, +1 all skill gems amulet that is a slight improvement to the one that I'm wearing right now. Or maybe, I don't know, make a whole bunch more and try to recombinate a really good one. But I think there's other ways that I could use my currency more efficiently at the moment. And then maybe, I'm still torn, like maybe make another build for speed farming or just take this one all the way to 100. Should be easily possible in softcore trade since we have access to Breachstone rotations and Timeless Legion stuff. And all those really juicy, rotatable sorts of high XP content.
I strongly suggest Coward's Trials, Rhoda. They are very, very fun, especially when you're the sole survivor.
Yeah, we're doing a lot of them in Guild, actually. Every couple days there's a bunch of Coward's Trials saved up, either Karak missions or drops. And then someone calls it out as like, I got one here. And then everyone is like, oh, I got one as well. I got one here. And all of a sudden, we're running like 6 Coward's Trials in a row. Very good. The problem is that 6 Coward's Trials is never enough to level up at this point. And then I'm just always like, but I'm going to lose the XP afterwards because I'm going to be doing stupid things. I just need to cut out the stupid things. Maybe follow the strat that you've been mentioning with the... where the small nodes on the Atlas tree doesn't do anything, only the notables at pack size, or what was it? But yeah, I'll figure that out.
And you can also just roll maps really conservatively as well, like transmute. That's my usual approach. If I'm sitting at say 0.87 of a level, I'll just be like, all right, stuff it. Time to just knuckle down, transmute maps, join missions.
Yeah, don't alk, true.
Yeah. Because so much difficulty in the game is map mods at the moment. And I think a lot of people just understate how much it is. And the payoff for them is not really worth it a lot of the time. Not now that map sustain is so high. Like, yeah, you do them if your character is so strong that you can do the Sentinel encounter with your map being alked in a tier, then yeah, you do elk it. But if your character's at a point where you have to choose between either I transmute and use the Sentinel or I elk and I don't use the Sentinel, then you should be transmuting. Which feels filthy, but it's just more loot.
Yeah, I'll definitely get into a groove that I feel is safe. Hopefully. And I've never gone to 100. I've done 91.9 in SSF Delve. Maybe this time I'll push the 100 because in softcore trade it should be really easy. I've always looked at softcore trade 100s as not real 100s because they're so easy to do. So it would be a shame if I actually don't have the persistence to get there myself. But yeah, I want to probably say it's the best idea to round things off here before we go into more deep dive discussion with these awesome people who I think could have been, just continuing and going on for hours and hours, but it's best to limit these podcasts to a certain length. But if you want to hear more from Sirgog and Tenkiei, then make sure to follow them. There should be links in chat. Wait, how did that work? How did that not work? It didn't do the underscore. You got an underscore, right? It's twitch.tv Sirgog _ right?
I don't have an underscore on mine.
You don't have an underscore?
I don't think so. Let me just...
No, I
check
just
that.
somehow remembered an underscore in your name. Maybe I'm stupid. But that's, I think, why my shoutout command didn't work. So, anyway, for the people who are watching this on the YouTube or listening on the podcast platforms, you will have links that you can click. You won't have to find the link here in the chat. There will be everything prepared for you, perfectly spelled out, so you just have to click to follow and get to these wonderful content creators. Sorry, didn't mean to cut you off. Did you want to add something there?
Me? No, I was just going to say thanks for having us.
Anytime again. It was a pleasure. And like I said, podcast is going to be up in full 24 hours after the start of this. It's going to premiere on YouTube, and it's going to be available on Spotify, Deezer, Stitcher, and so on. Next podcast will be on Saturday next week, on the 11th of June. We'll announce the podcast somewhere in the next couple of days via my Twitter, so follow if you want to stay updated with that. And other than that, happy farming and have a wonderful week in Path of Exile, and see you for the next one.
See you, mate.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming.